Take a deep breath, get comfortable, and let me tell you a story.
Rain slid slowly down the massive glass windows of the Hollywood Hills mansion, while soft jazz drifted through the air like expensive perfume. The house sat high above Los Angeles, glowing against the dark hills like a palace built for people who never heard the word no. Inside, politicians laughed beside real estate tycoons. Women in designer gowns held wine glasses carefully at chest level, while pretending not to judge one another. Men with million-dollar watches discussed land deals between bites of steak that cost more than some people's grocery bills for a month. Everything looked polished, controlled, perfect. But at the center of the room, Maria could already feel something cracking, not loudly, quietly. The kind of crack that starts small before it destroys an entire foundation. Maria sat beside her husband at the long candle-lit dining table, forcing herself to maintain the same calm smile she had practiced in the mirror earlier that evening. Her emerald dress fit beautifully against her skin. Simple, elegant, not loud enough to attract criticism, not plain enough to look insecure. She had spent almost 2 hours deciding how to wear her hair after William casually mentioned on the drive there that sleek styles usually work better around these people. These people. That phrase had stayed with her the entire ride. Across from her, an older investor's wife studied Maria with the kind of smile women used when they wanted to insult somebody, without looking cruel enough to be blamed for it. Maria recognized that smile immediately. Black women learned that smile early. The woman tilted her head slightly. "So, Maria," she asked softly, "where did you say you grew up again?" Maria swallowed carefully before answering. "South Los Angeles." The woman nodded slowly while taking a sip of wine. "Oh, wow. You've adjusted very well." A few people nearby chuckled under their breath. Maria felt heat rise behind her ribs, but she smiled politely. "Thank you," she replied calmly. "And you've adjusted very well to hiding insults inside compliments." The table went quiet. One investor nearly choked trying to hide a laugh. Another man looked down at his plate immediately. The woman's smile stiffened. Maria kept her posture relaxed, though her heartbeat had started pressing heavily against her chest. Beside her, William shifted uncomfortably. Maria noticed it instantly. That tiny, nervous movement he always made whenever wealthy people became uncomfortable around her. At home, William loved her loudly. In rooms like this, he loved her carefully. And careful love always came with conditions. William forced a laugh. "Oh, trust me," he said, raising his wine glass slightly. "Maria still has that South Ella fire in her. We're polishing it out slowly." The table exploded with relieved laughter. Maria froze. Not because the joke was brutal, because it was familiar. That was the problem. It wasn't the first time William had used her as social currency. Little comments, tiny humiliations, disguised as humor. Small betrayals performed to keep rich people comfortable. Maria slowly turned toward him. William kept smiling for the table, still performing, still chasing approval, still pretending not to notice what he was doing to her. One of the investors laughed loudly. "Oh, come on, William," the man joked. "That fire's probably why you married her." William smirked. And that should have been the moment he stopped talking. It should have been the moment he defended her, touched her hand, changed the subject, protected his wife. Instead, William leaned back in his chair, loosened by expensive wine and wealthy attention. Love can make a man ignore compatibility. Silence, not normal silence. Heavy silence, the kind that arrives when people realize a line has been crossed, but nobody wants to acknowledge it first. Maria stared at him. William looked proud of himself for half a second. Then he finally saw her face, and everything inside him shifted too late. Maria did not cry. That made it worse. She did not yell, did not defend herself, did not create a scene, because humiliation hits differently when it comes from the person who promised to protect you. Slowly, Maria placed her napkin beside her untouched plate. The sound of silverware touching china suddenly felt louder than the jazz music floating through the mansion. Every eye at the table followed her movements. Maria stood carefully, gracefully, controlled. William immediately sat forward. "Maria?" But she never let him finish. Not angrily, not dramatically. She simply looked at him long enough for him to finally understand what he had done. And somehow that hurt more than screaming ever could. Then she walked away, quiet heels against marble floors, past billionaires, past politicians, past fake smiles. Nobody stopped her. Nobody knew how. The front doors opened. Cold rain air rushed inside briefly as Maria disappeared into the night, and for the first time that evening, William looked afraid. Because deep down he understood something the others at that table did not. Maria was not dramatic. Maria was patient, and patient pain was dangerous. Have you ever watched somebody betray the person who stood beside them the most? Not through cheating, not through violence, but through embarrassment. Public humiliation hits differently because it tells the world, this person means less to me than the approval of strangers. And sometimes, the deepest heartbreak comes from watching somebody slowly become a different person in front of other people. What nobody inside that mansion understood that night was that the woman they quietly laughed at would one day become the woman powerful enough to destroy every deal sitting at that table. But at that moment, Maria was just a wife, standing in the rain, trying not to fall apart before reaching the car. Welcome back to Mr. George Stories, where life's most powerful lessons come wrapped in unforgettable tales. If you're new to this family, thank you for joining us. Please hit the subscribe button because it helps us share stories like this on YouTube. And tonight's story is about love, status, humiliation, and the painful cost of valuing public approval more than loyalty. Because William did love Maria. That was the tragedy. He loved her laugh, loved the way she filled silence with warmth, loved the way she could walk into cold rooms and somehow make them feel human again. But love without protection becomes selfish. And William was about to learn that lesson in the worst possible way. Inside the mansion, conversations slowly started again, quietly at first. People pretended to move on, but awkwardness lingered across the table. William loosened his tie slightly while staring toward the front entrance Maria had walked through moments earlier. One investor cleared his throat. "Well," the man muttered awkwardly, "women can be emotional." William barely heard him, because Maria had not looked emotional. She looked done. That terrified him. William suddenly pushed his chair back. "I'll be right back." He moved quickly through the mansion, ignoring the eyes following him now. Outside, rain dampened the driveway lights. Valets stood awkwardly near the entrance, pretending not to watch. William scanned the street desperately. No Maria, just wet pavement. A black SUV disappearing down the hill. His chest tightened. He pulled out his phone immediately, called once, straight to voicemail. Again, voicemail, a third time, nothing. For the first time all evening, the performance disappeared from his face completely. Now there was only panic. Real panic. The kind that comes when somebody realizes the damage cannot be taken back with flowers and apologies. Inside the Uber, Maria stared silently through the rain-covered window while Los Angeles lights blurred together outside. Her makeup remained untouched, but her chest hurt so badly it almost felt physical. The driver glanced at her through the mirror carefully. "You okay back there?" Maria forced a small nod. "Yeah," but her voice cracked slightly anyway. The driver looked like he wanted to ask another question. Instead, he turned the music lower. Old soul music filled the quiet car softly. Maria looked down at her wedding ring, then slowly turned it around her finger without removing it. Her mind replayed William's voice over and over again. Love can make a man ignore compatibility. Not compatibility, not his wife. Compatibility. As if she were a bad business investment he regretted emotionally. Maria closed her eyes tightly, and suddenly memories started colliding painfully against one another. William dancing badly at her cousin's cookout. William laughing while trying hot sauce that nearly destroyed him. William kissing her forehead while she studied late at night. William promising her, "You will never face this world alone again." Tears finally slipped down her face, not because strangers laughed, because William joined them. And somewhere high above Los Angeles, inside a mansion full of wealthy people, William stood frozen near the entrance, realizing the worst mistake of his life had just walked away from him in silence. 3 years earlier, before the investor dinner, before the fake smiles, before William started speaking to Maria differently whenever rich people entered the room, there was music, laughter, warmth. The kind of warmth money could never manufacture, no matter how expensive the furniture looked. South Los Angeles moved differently from Beverly Hills. People sat outside talking long after sunset. Neighbors knew each other's business without needing social media. Music floated from apartment windows on weekends, while somebody's uncle argued over dominoes nearby, like the game decided national policy. Kids ran through front yards. Women laughed loudly without apologizing for it. And every Sunday, after church, Maria's family gathered at her grandmother's apartment building, like it was sacred tradition. Because to them, it was. Maria grew up surrounded by noise that felt alive, not chaos. Life. The kitchen always smelled like seasoning, perfume, and hair products at the same time. Her aunties believed every problem in the world could somehow be discussed while braiding somebody's hair or frying chicken. And every conversation came with honesty, whether you asked for it or not. You too skinny. You work too hard. That man better not waste your time. Baby, stop dating potential and start dating stability. Maria heard all of it growing up, especially from Aunt Denise. Aunt Denise believed William looked expensive and nervous the first time Maria brought him around. William had survived billion-dollar negotiations before meeting Maria's family. None of that prepared him for Sunday dinner in South L.A. The moment he walked into the apartment courtyard carrying a peach cobbler from an overpriced bakery in Santa Monica, Maria's younger cousin nearly yelled loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "Oh, nah," her cousin shouted. "This man brought rich people pie." The entire courtyard burst into laughter. William froze immediately. Maria grabbed his arm, trying not to laugh herself. "Just smile," she whispered. "If they roast you, it means they like you." "That's comforting," William muttered. It was not comforting. Within 20 minutes, William got interrogated harder than a criminal suspect. Her uncles questioned his job. Her cousins questioned his intentions. Her aunties questioned whether he knew how to survive without valet parking. One aunt stared directly at his loafers. "Baby, those shoes don't look built for real life." Maria nearly choked laughing. William looked down defensively. "They're Italian." "That's exactly my point." More laughter exploded around the courtyard. William should have hated every second of it. Instead, he loved it, because nobody in his world laughed like this. Nobody interrupted each other loudly while arguing over old music. Nobody danced while cooking. Nobody hugged for no reason. His family gatherings felt more like business meetings with expensive food. Maria's family felt human. That terrified and fascinated him at the same time. At one point, Aunt Denise pulled Maria aside near the kitchen window, while everyone else argued over whether old-school R&B had died. "You sure about him?" she asked quietly. Maria smiled immediately. "Yes." Aunt Denise glanced toward William, who was currently losing badly in dominoes, while Maria's uncles celebrated loudly. "He look at you like you hung the moon," Denise admitted carefully. "But men raised around money sometimes love different." Maria frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" "It means some people know how to adore you privately, but struggle to stand beside you publicly." Maria brushed the warning away back then, because William did love her. At least it felt real, and honestly, William believed it was real, too. Back then, he still knew how to choose Maria over appearances. That night, after the cookout ended, Maria and William drove slowly through the city with the windows down, while old-school soul music played softly through the speaker. William loosened his collar dramatically. "I think your aunt threatened me 6 different ways tonight." Maria laughed so hard she nearly spilled her drink. "That means she accepts you. She called me Country Club Casper." "That's affection." William shook his head while smiling. "You people are impossible." Maria turned toward him immediately. "You people?" William realized his mistake instantly. Maria narrowed her eyes playfully. "Oh, wow," she said slowly. "That's how we talking now?" William started laughing immediately. No, that came out wrong. I meant your family." Too late. Racism exposed. William groaned dramatically. "You are never letting this go, are you?" "Absolutely not." That became their rhythm. Playful, easy, natural. Maria challenged William constantly, not aggressively. Honestly, she refused to worship wealth the way people in his world expected. And William admired that deeply. She made him feel less fake, less managed, less trapped inside the polished image his family spent decades building. William grew up in a world where emotions stayed controlled. Even disappointment came dressed politely. At dinner parties in Beverly Hills, people insulted each other while smiling. Nobody raised their voices. Nobody admitted pain openly. Nobody discussed race, unless speaking carefully enough to avoid accountability. William's parents cared about appearances the way some people cared about religion. Everything had to look correct. Correct schools, correct neighborhoods, correct relationships, correct image. Maria threatened that image without even trying. Not because she lacked class, because she possessed authenticity his world could not control. The first time William brought Maria to a private fundraiser in Malibu, his mother smiled too carefully all evening. His father barely asked Maria questions beyond surface-level politeness, and one older investor spent the entire night referring to Maria as articulate like it surprised him personally. On the drive home, William gripped the steering wheel tightly. "I'm sorry about them." Maria looked out the passenger window quietly. "For what? They can be rich?" William exhaled heavily. "They'll come around." Maria turned toward him gently. "William, your family acts like loving me is some kind of social risk. That's not true." She gave him a long look. "Okay." William hated when she said okay like that. Not angry, just disappointed enough to make him question himself. So he reached over and grabbed her hand. "I love you." Maria smiled softly. "I know." And she believed him. That was the heartbreaking part. She believed him completely, because privately, William treated her like the center of his world. Late-night taco trucks near Venice Beach became their thing. William would show up after meetings still wearing $1,000 suits, while Maria laughed at how out of place he looked standing beside food trucks at midnight. "You know rich people sleep, right?" she teased one night. William shrugged. "Most of them are miserable anyway." Maria handed him hot sauce carefully. "Use a little." William ignored her. 30 seconds later, he nearly coughed himself, unconscious. Maria laughed so hard she cried. "You don't listen. I'm in physical pain." William gasped. That's what happens when you disrespect Latino hot sauce. Another night, they danced barefoot in Maria's apartment kitchen while cooking pasta after midnight. The smoke detector nearly went off because William got distracted kissing her instead of watching the garlic bread. Maria pushed him backward laughing. "See? This is why rich people burn food. No survival instincts." William grabbed her waist immediately. "I survived your family cookout. That was barely survival." Then he kissed her again, slowly, carefully, like she was peace instead of pressure. Those were the moments Maria felt deepest in love with him. Not because of the money, not because of the luxury, because William seemed softer around her. Real, like she rescued something inside him his world had buried years ago. And William felt it too. Maria gave him emotional freedom. Around her, he laughed louder, talked more openly, stopped pretending all the time. Even his friends noticed. One night at a rooftop gathering in Beverly Hills, William's longtime friend Jordan pulled him aside while Maria talked with another couple nearby. "I've never seen you like this," Jordan admitted. William looked toward Maria instantly. She was laughing at something while holding a glass of wine. Completely unaware, William was staring at her like she changed gravity itself. "What do you mean?" "You look happy," William answered, without hesitation. "I am." Jordan nodded slowly. "Just be careful." William frowned. "With what?" "With trying to fit her into your world too much." William looked confused. Jordan continued carefully. "People around us don't change quietly. They pressure you slowly until you start managing the person you love instead of protecting them." William brushed the warning aside back then, because he believed love alone was enough. And for a while, it almost was. Months later, standing beside the ocean in Santa Monica, while cold wind crashed against the pier below them, William asked Maria to marry him. Nothing extravagant. No photographers hiding nearby. No audience. No performance. Just William, nervously holding a ring, while Maria stared at him in complete shock. "You're my peace," he told her quietly. "Before you, everything in my life felt expensive, but empty." Maria cried immediately. "Yes." William kissed her while waves crashed below the pier, and city lights glowed behind them. And in that moment, They truly believed love could overcome class, race, pressure, and status. Neither of them understood yet. That love without courage eventually collapses under public pressure. Before William became obsessed with maintaining an image, before Maria started feeling alone inside her own marriage, there was a period of time when their relationship felt almost impossible to doubt. Not perfect, real, the kind of love that grows slowly through ordinary moments until one day you realize somebody has quietly become part of your daily breathing. William first met Maria on a Thursday night in downtown Los Angeles. The lounge where Maria worked sat between luxury apartment towers and corporate office buildings filled with people who spent most of their lives pretending not to be tired. By nightfall, the place transformed into a polished social playground for wealthy professionals. Low music, expensive whiskey, carefully dressed people trying to look relaxed while discussing money. Maria had already worked a full office shift earlier that day before changing clothes and rushing to the lounge for her second job. She was exhausted, but nobody would know it watching her move through the room. Maria carried herself with natural energy, not fake customer service energy, real warmth. She remembered names, remembered drink orders, remembered who tipped well and who treated staff badly. That was how William noticed her. Not because she was beautiful, though she absolutely was. Not because men stared when she walked by, though they did. William noticed her because she treated people differently from everyone else in the room, especially people who had nothing to offer her socially. That night, one wealthy client got angry after a janitor accidentally bumped into a table while cleaning near the very important person section. A wine glass shattered across the floor. The client exploded immediately. For God's sake, can somebody competent work here? The entire room went awkwardly quiet. The janitor apologized repeatedly while kneeling to clean the broken glass. Nobody helped him. Nobody even looked at him directly, except Maria. Without hesitation, she walked over, grabbed towels from behind the bar, and knelt beside him. "It's okay," she said calmly. "Don't touch the bigger pieces with your hands." The client looked irritated. "You don't need to do that yourself." Maria never even looked up at him. Clearly, somebody does. William watched the entire thing silently from across the room, and something about that moment stayed with him. Not dramatic, not flashy, just human. Later that night, after the crowd thinned, William remained seated near the bar, pretending to finish a drink he no longer wanted. Maria noticed immediately. "You've been nursing that same whiskey for 40 minutes, she teased while wiping the counter nearby. "Either it's terrible, or you're avoiding going home." William smiled slightly. "Maybe both." Maria leaned against the bar casually. "Tough day?" "Depends how you define tough. You rich people always answer questions like you're being interviewed on podcasts." William laughed unexpectedly. "Rich people?" Maria pointed toward his watch. "That watch costs more than my car." William glanced down. "That obvious?" Painfully. For the next hour, they talked about everything except money. Music, bad relationships, favorite foods, family. Maria roasted him for never seasoning his food correctly. William defended himself terribly. "You think salt is seasoning?" Maria accused. "That's not true. You own 3 different types of olive oil and still can't cook chicken properly." "How do you know I can't cook?" Maria stared at him flatly. "You have I burn toast confidently energy." William laughed harder than he had in weeks, maybe months, and that surprised him. Most women around him tried to impress him. Maria challenged him naturally, without trying. There was no performance around her, no social climbing, no careful flirting designed to secure lifestyle upgrades. She treated him like a person instead of a prize. That changed everything. After that night, William kept finding excuses to return to the lounge. At first he told himself it was coincidence. Then Maria started noticing patterns. "You know we close at midnight, right?" She joked one evening. William glanced around innocently. "I like the atmosphere." Maria smirked immediately. "No. You like me." William smiled slowly. That too. Their relationship grew quietly after that. Not rushed, not dramatic. Some nights they sat on the beach in Santa Monica, eating tacos while arguing over music. Maria believed old-school soul music carried more emotional truth than modern music. William insisted every generation said that. Maria pointed a taco at him accusingly. You grew up around too many emotionless, rich people. William took a bite calmly. You dance aggressively for somebody criticizing others. That's because your people dance like tax accountants. My people? Yes, your expensive people. William nearly choked, laughing. You really think I sound rich, don't you? You pronounce water like it graduated from private school. William laughed so loudly nearby tourists turned toward them briefly, and slowly those moments became his favorite part of life. Not boardrooms, not investor dinner. Maria. One night William brought Maria to a rooftop party overlooking Beverly Hills. The entire event felt polished beyond comfort. Women wearing dresses that looked too expensive to sit down in. Men discussing investments while pretending it wasn't competition. Maria stayed close to William at first, quietly observing the room. You okay? William asked softly. Maria nodded. These people smile like they charge monthly subscription fees for emotions. William burst out laughing. A nearby couple glanced toward them disapprovingly. Maria leaned closer. See? I told you. William kissed her forehead lightly. That small gesture mattered more than he realized back then, because in those early days, William still protected her openly, proudly, without hesitation. When one man asked Maria what neighborhood she came from, with obvious judgment hiding behind the question, William answered before she could. She comes from one of the strongest communities in this city. Maria looked at him surprised. William continued calmly. Honestly, most people in rooms like this wouldn't survive where she grew up. The man laughed awkwardly before walking away. Maria stared at William afterward. What was that? The truth. That version of William existed once. That was what made the future so painful. Maria didn't marry a cruel man. She married a man who slowly became weaker than the pressure around him. Months later, Maria invited William to another large family gathering for her grandmother's birthday. Music blasted through the apartment courtyard, while cousins danced near folding tables overloaded with food. William arrived wearing linen pants and a button-up shirt that immediately got roasted by 3 aunties within 60 seconds. Baby, dressed like he owned a yacht. William looked at Maria helplessly. Do they ever stop? No. Aunt Denise walked up, holding a paper plate. You hungry, William? Yes, ma'am. Good. Because you too skinny to survive this family long term. Maria nearly collapsed, laughing. Later that evening, one of Maria's younger cousins dragged William into a dance circle. William resisted immediately. No, absolutely not. Too late, Maria yelled from nearby. Get in there, country club. The family erupted. William tried anyway. Poorly, very poorly. Maria laughed so hard tears rolled down her face, while William attempted to follow the rhythm with the coordination of a confused substitute teacher. You dancing like your mortgage rate depends on it. Somebody shouted. William pointed defensively. I hate all of you. No, you don't, Maria yelled. And she was right. He loved this family, loved how alive everything felt. Nobody cared about status here. Nobody measured worth through networking value. People laughed loudly, argued openly, loved honestly. William had spent his whole life inside rooms where everybody carefully managed themselves. Maria's world taught him emotional freedom. One night after the cookout, they sat together in Maria's apartment kitchen, eating leftovers directly from containers. While old soul music played quietly nearby, Maria rested her head against his shoulder. You know what I like about you? She asked softly. William looked down at her. What? You listen. William smiled faintly. That's a low standard. No, Maria said quietly. It really isn't. That answer stayed with him longer than she realized, because William knew how often people interrupted Maria in wealthy spaces, corrected her, measured her, observed her. But when they were alone together, she relaxed completely. And William loved being the person who made her feel safe enough to do that. Eventually, their relationship became serious enough that people around William started asking questions more directly. Some subtle, some not. One investor asked him casually during golf, So this relationship serious? William answered immediately. Yes. The investor looked surprised. William noticed. That irritated him instantly. What's that look for? The man shrugged carefully. No look. Just unexpected. Why? The investor avoided eye contact. William understood anyway. And for a moment, anger burned inside him sharply. Back then, He still hated when people reduced Maria to race and background. Back then, he still defended her naturally. But pressure changes people slowly, not all at once. That was the danger. Nobody wakes up evil overnight. Sometimes people compromise themselves piece by piece, until one day the person they used to be barely exists anymore. And William had no idea yet that the same wealthy world he once pushed against for Maria would eventually become the exact audience he betrayed her to impress. Marriage changed quietly at first, not through screaming, not through betrayal, not through another woman. The damage started in smaller ways that were easier to excuse. That was what made it dangerous. 3 months after the wedding, William received the promotion he had spent years chasing: senior partner. The title came with more money, more influence, more visibility, and more pressure from people whose approval controlled entire industries inside Los Angeles. The promotion dinner took place at a private rooftop restaurant downtown overlooking glowing city lights. Developers, investors, executives, everybody shook William's hand, like he had finally entered the level they always expected from him. Maria sat beside him, smiling proudly, while conversations flowed around the table about acquisitions, luxury zoning projects, and political relationships. William looked happy, but not relaxed. Maria noticed that immediately. Every time she spoke naturally, William's eyes flickered toward nearby reactions. Every time she laughed loudly, he subtly lowered his voice afterward, like he was trying to rebalance the room. At first, she ignored it. New pressure came with new responsibilities. That was normal. At least, that was what she told herself. Later that night, after the dinner ended, William loosened his tie while driving them home through downtown traffic. "You okay?" Maria asked gently. William nodded quickly. "Yeah, just tired." Maria studied him quietly. "You barely looked at me all night." "That's not true." "It is." William sighed softly. "Maria, tonight was important. I know. There are people in those rooms that can affect my entire future." Maria smiled faintly. "And somehow my laugh almost ruined your empire?" William gripped the steering wheel tighter immediately. "That's not what I meant. But it's what happened." William did not answer right away. That silence mattered. Maria turned toward the passenger window quietly. Outside, Los Angeles glowed beautifully. Inside the car, something small cracked between them for the first time. A week later, William invited Maria to another networking event in Beverly Hills. This one felt even colder than the last. Women stood in tiny circles discussing private schools, destination weddings, and property values with polished smiles that never fully reached their eyes. Maria tried. She truly did. She joined conversations, asked questions, complimented people sincerely. But every interaction carried invisible tension underneath it. One woman blinked twice after hearing where Maria grew up. Another asked if Maria had always been interested in luxury real estate. As if black women naturally belonged somewhere else. Maria handled everything gracefully. But she noticed something else, too. William never corrected anyone, never challenged anything, never defended her, unless directly necessary. He just smiled carefully and kept the evening moving. On the drive home, Maria removed her earrings slowly while staring ahead. "Do your friends even like me?" William frowned. "What kind of question is that?" "A real one." "They do like you." Maria looked at him directly. "Then why do I always feel like I'm interviewing for acceptance?" William exhaled heavily. "They're just different from your crowd." "My crowd?" William closed his eyes briefly. "You know, that's not what I mean." Maria laughed quietly. "But it keeps becoming exactly what you mean." William hated those conversations because deep down he knew she was right. Not completely, but enough to make him uncomfortable. That discomfort slowly started changing him. A month later, Maria stood in front of the bathroom mirror preparing for another company event, while William adjusted his cufflinks nearby. Maria had chosen a beautiful, natural, curly hairstyle for the evening. Elegant, confident, beautifully hers. William looked toward her reflection, then hesitated. That hesitation alone annoyed Maria instantly. "What?" William spoke carefully. "Are you wearing your hair like that tonight?" Maria turned slowly. "What's wrong with my hair?" "Nothing's wrong with it." William. He rubbed the back of his neck. "I just think the sleeker look works better at these events." Silence. Maria stared at him through the mirror. Not angry yet, just hurt. "You mean it makes rich white people more comfortable?" William sighed immediately. "Why do you always turn everything into race?" Maria almost laughed, because sometimes race is already in the room before I arrive. William looked exhausted suddenly. That's not fair. No, Maria replied softly. What's not fair is me feeling like I have to edit myself every time we leave this house. William walked closer carefully. Maria, I'm trying to help. No, you're trying to manage perception. He opened his mouth, closed it again, because he knew there was truth inside her words. Maria eventually changed her hairstyle anyway, not because she agreed, because she was tired. That hurt even more. William noticed her silence throughout the event later that night. Normally, Maria moved through rooms with warmth and confidence. Now, she looked cautious, measured, careful with herself, and instead of recognizing that he caused it, part of William felt relieved the evening went smoother socially. That was the beginning of the problem. Approval started rewarding behavior he should have questioned morally. Another evening, William hosted several investors at their home for drinks before a downtown charity gala. Maria walked into the living room while conversations paused briefly. One older executive smiled politely. Maria, good to see you. You too? The man laughed softly. William says you keep him humble. Maria smiled. I try. William chuckled while pouring whiskey. She also keeps me educated on things I'd never survive otherwise. Everybody laughed lightly. Maria smiled politely too. But internally, exhaustion was building, because William increasingly spoke about her like she was cultural entertainment instead of his partner, a story, an experience, something that made him seem more layered in wealthy spaces. Later that night, after the guests left, Maria removed her heels near the staircase, while William checked messages on his phone. Can I ask you something honestly? William glanced up. Of course. Why do you always explain me to people? William frowned. What? You always translate me before people even know me. That's not true. It is. Maria stood slowly. You make little jokes about where I'm from before anybody else can. William looked defensive immediately. They're harmless. To you? William tossed his phone onto the table. Maria. Every couple adjusts to each other socially. Maria nodded slowly. Yes. But only one of us keeps doing all the adjusting. That sentence stayed in the room long after she walked upstairs. William sat alone downstairs afterwards, staring at nothing. Part of him knew Maria was drifting emotionally, but another part kept convincing himself she was overreacting, because the comments felt small, tiny corrections, tiny jokes, tiny compromises. But relationships rarely collapse from one giant moment. Sometimes they collapse from accumulated disappointments nobody addresses honestly enough. And William still didn't understand something critical yet. Maria could survive struggle. She could survive judgment. She could survive pressure. What she could not survive was becoming emotionally unsafe beside the person she trusted most. By their second year of marriage, William had mastered a version of himself Maria barely recognized anymore. Not at home. At home, he still kissed her forehead while passing through the kitchen, still wrapped his arms around her waist while she cooked, still fell asleep with one hand resting against her leg like he needed physical reassurance she was near him. That was what confused Maria the most. The tenderness never disappeared completely. It simply stopped existing in public, and eventually, that contradiction started exhausting her emotionally. William's world became larger after the promotion. More invitations, more elite dinners, more private events inside glass mansions hanging above Los Angeles hills. The higher William climbed socially, the more carefully he started curating everything around him, especially Maria. One Friday evening, they attended a luxury charity fundraiser at a hotel in Beverly Hills, where politicians mingled beside celebrities and developers spoke about housing initiatives they would never personally live near. Maria stood near the ballroom entrance, adjusting the sleeve of her black dress, while watching wealthy couples greet each other with air kisses and rehearsed warmth. You okay? William asked quietly. Maria nodded. Yeah. But William noticed the hesitation. You sure? Maria looked around the ballroom slowly. Everybody here acts like they're being filmed. William gave a quick laugh. That's just how these events are. Maria turned toward him. And that doesn't bother you? No, that's the problem. William's smile faded slightly. Before he could respond, another investor approached them enthusiastically. William, the man shook his hand aggressively before glancing toward Maria. And you must be Maria. She smiled politely. "It's nice to meet you." The investor nodded. "You clean up very well." A pause followed immediately. Tiny, awkward, sharp. Maria saw William hear it. She waited for him to say something, anything. Instead, William forced a social smile. "Maria always makes me look better." The conversation continued. Maria remained polite, graceful, composed. But internally, disappointment settled deeper, because moments like this kept happening, and William kept choosing comfort over confrontation. Later that evening, Maria stood alone near the balcony overlooking the city, while groups formed naturally around people they already accepted socially. Nobody insulted her openly. That was not how these people operated. The judgment arrived differently, through exclusion, through coded compliments, through subtle questions designed to establish whether she truly belonged. A woman in a silver gown approached holding champagne. "You're William's wife, right?" Maria smiled politely. "Yes." The woman tilted her head slightly. "You're gorgeous." Honestly, I think it's wonderful how open-minded relationships are becoming nowadays. Maria stared at her calmly. There it was again. That careful disrespect dressed as sophistication. Maria smiled faintly. Human decency is definitely progressing slowly. The woman blinked twice before awkwardly excusing herself. Maria exhaled softly afterward. A few seconds later, William appeared beside her. "What happened?" Maria looked toward him tiredly. "Nothing new." William rubbed his jaw. "You know how these people are." Maria laughed quietly. "That sentence, right there, is the problem." William frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means you keep excusing behavior you should be embarrassed by." William lowered his voice carefully. "Maria, not here." Her eyes locked onto his immediately. "Not here." Those two words cut deeper than he realized, because increasingly, there was never a place where Maria was fully allowed to express discomfort without becoming inconvenient to William's image. So she nodded quietly. "Okay." William relaxed slightly after she backed down, but Maria noticed that too. And every time William relaxed after she silenced herself, something inside her felt lonelier. Weeks later, William hosted another networking dinner at a private members-only club near West Hollywood. Maria spent nearly an hour preparing beforehand, carefully choosing clothes, carefully choosing makeup, carefully choosing words she would use around people already waiting for reasons to reduce her. While fastening her earrings, she caught herself rehearsing how to pronounce certain words more softly. That realization made her stomach turn immediately. William walked into the bedroom adjusting his watch. "You almost ready?" Maria stared at herself in the mirror quietly. "Do you think I sound embarrassing around your friends?" William looked genuinely confused. "What? Just answer honestly." "Of course not." Maria turned toward him slowly. "Then why do you keep correcting the way I say things?" William sighed. "Maria?" "No, seriously." He walked closer carefully. "Sometimes you're just more direct than people in my world are used to." Maria nodded slowly. "My world." William immediately regretted the phrase. "I didn't mean it like that. But you keep meaning things exactly like that." William looked frustrated now. "You know what? Everything becomes an argument lately." Maria laughed softly. "Because I'm tired of feeling managed." "That's dramatic." "No," she replied quietly. "What's dramatic is feeling your husband tense up every time you speak naturally around rich people." William looked away first. That silence answered everything. At the dinner later that night, Maria sat beside William while listening to conversations about luxury developments, market expansion, and investment portfolios. Across the table, two wealthy women discussed vacation properties in Europe, while occasionally glancing toward Maria with polite curiosity. One finally smiled. "So, Maria, what do you do exactly?" Maria answered calmly. "I worked administrative support for years. Now I'm consulting part-time with community outreach projects." The woman nodded slowly. "That's wonderful. It's always refreshing seeing people stay connected to grassroots environments." Maria nearly smiled at the wording, grassroots environments, as if she came from a wildlife reserve instead of South Los Angeles. Before Maria could answer, William jumped into the conversation smoothly. "Maria's amazing with people. Honestly, she helps me navigate communities I never understood growing up." The women laughed lightly. Maria stared at her husband quietly. Again, he was packaging her into something socially digestible, not intentionally cruel, but performative, like he needed wealthy people to understand why she belonged near him. That hurt more every time it happened, because love should not require explanation. On the drive home, Maria remained unusually quiet. William noticed immediately. "You're doing that thing again." Maria looked out the window. "What thing?" "Shutting down." She gave a tired laugh. "You spent the whole night translating me to rich people, like I'm some cultural exchange program." William groaned. "That's not what happened." "It is, Maria. I was complimenting you." "No," she said softly. "You were making me easier for them to accept." William gripped the steering wheel harder. "You think I'm ashamed of you?" Maria turned toward him slowly. "I think you're afraid of making them uncomfortable." William said nothing. Traffic lights reflected across the windshield while silence filled the car heavily. Finally, Maria spoke again. "You know what hurts the most?" William kept driving quietly. "You don't even realize when you're doing it anymore." That sentence followed him for days afterward, because deep down, William knew something had changed inside him. He started anticipating judgment before it happened, started controlling environments before discomfort could arise, started smoothing Maria's edges socially because wealthy spaces rewarded him every time he did, and the more acceptance he gained professionally, the weaker he became emotionally. Meanwhile, Maria kept trying. That was the tragedy. She studied wine etiquette online before events, learned investor terminology, so conversations flowed easier, practiced restraint inside rooms where people constantly tested her indirectly. She worked harder to fit into William's world than anybody realized. But no amount of effort fixes environments where somebody is only conditionally accepted. One night after another exhausting event, Maria stood barefoot in their kitchen, removing makeup, while William poured water nearby. "You know what's crazy?" she asked quietly. William glanced toward her. "What?" "I used to walk into rooms confidently." William frowned slightly. "You still do?" Maria shook her head. "No. Now I walk into rooms wondering how much of myself needs editing first." William looked genuinely hurt hearing that. "Maria." She wiped makeup slowly from beneath her eyes. "I miss when you used to look proud, standing beside me." William stepped closer immediately. "I am proud of you." Maria looked at him carefully. "Only when nobody important is watching." The investor dinner was supposed to be the biggest night of William's career. That was how he described it for weeks. A private gathering inside a luxury Hollywood Hills estate owned by one of the most powerful developers in Los Angeles. Politicians would attend, major investors, entertainment executives, people with enough money to quietly influence entire neighborhoods without ever stepping foot inside them. William spent days preparing obsessively, checking seating arrangements, reviewing investor profiles, memorizing financial talking points. Even the wine selection became a discussion serious enough to frustrate Maria. "You've talked about this Pinot Noir longer than you talked about me all week," she teased one evening. William barely looked up from his laptop. "This dinner matters." Maria smiled faintly. "I know." But increasingly, that sentence carried distance underneath it, because somewhere along the way, Maria stopped feeling like part of William's success. Now she felt like something he was trying to manage around it. 3 nights before the dinner, Maria stood inside their bedroom, holding 2 dresses against herself, while William adjusted his tie in the mirror nearby. "What about this one?" she asked. William glanced briefly. "The black dress is safer." Maria lowered the green one slowly. "Safer." William heard it immediately. "That's not what I meant. You keep using words like that lately." William sighed heavily. "Maria, why does every conversation become a problem now?" She looked at him carefully. "Because I'm starting to realize how much shrinking myself has become part of loving you." William rubbed his forehead. "You're overthinking this dinner." "No," Maria replied quietly. "You are." For a moment, guilt crossed William's face. Then his phone rang again. Another investor, another conversation, another distraction. Maria quietly placed the green dress back inside the closet. The night of the dinner arrived cold and rainy. Los Angeles lights shimmered against wet pavement, while luxury cars curved slowly through the hills toward the massive estate overlooking the city. Maria sat silently in the passenger seat during the drive. Her emerald dress fit beautifully against her skin, elegant, refined. She chose it anyway, despite William preferring the black one. Tonight, she wanted to feel like herself again, even if only a little. William noticed her silence while driving. "You okay?" Maria nodded lightly. "Just tired." But both of them knew that was not the truth. Tension had lived between them for months now. Quiet tension, the dangerous kind. William parked near the entrance, while valets rushed through the rain with umbrellas. The mansion glowed with wealth before they even stepped inside. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls, soft jazz floating through hidden speakers, caterers moving carefully through rooms full of powerful people, pretending not to measure one another constantly. The moment William entered, his entire energy changed. Maria noticed instantly. His posture straightened, his smile sharpened, his voice became smoother, more polished, like somebody stepping onto a stage. Several executives approached immediately. "William, good to see you. Heard big things about the partnership." Handshakes, back slaps, forced laughter. Maria stood beside him, smiling politely, while wealthy strangers assessed her subtly with every glance. One woman complimented her dress while staring slightly too long at her hair. Another asked where she was from, with curiosity that felt more investigative than conversational. Maria handled every interaction gracefully, but emotionally, exhaustion was already building. At one point, William leaned toward her quietly. "Try to relax tonight." Maria stared at him. "I am relaxed. You seem tense." She almost laughed, because nothing made her more tense than William constantly monitoring her behavior around rich people. Still, she nodded. "Okay." The main dinner began an hour later, inside an enormous candlelit dining room overlooking rain-covered hills. Important guests filled the table: developers, politicians, entertainment investors, old money executives whose families had been wealthy long before William was born. Maria sat beside William near the center of the table, while servers poured wine carefully into crystal glasses. Conversations moved smoothly at first. Real estate, private equity, city expansion projects, tax negotiations. Maria contributed thoughtfully whenever appropriate. She listened carefully, asked intelligent questions, responded with warmth and confidence. And slowly, she noticed something uncomfortable. Several people seemed surprised she could hold these conversations so naturally. That familiar underestimation again. Across from her sat an older investor's wife, wearing diamonds large enough to pay college tuition somewhere. The woman had spent most of the evening observing Maria carefully, not openly hostile. Worse, curious, in a way that felt deeply disrespectful underneath politeness. Eventually the woman smiled. "So Maria," she asked softly, "where did you say you grew up again?" Maria already understood the game. Still, she answered calmly, "South Los Angeles." The woman nodded slowly while lifting her wine glass. "Oh wow." A pause followed. "You've adjusted very well." Tiny laughter scattered lightly around the table, not loud enough to sound cruel, just enough to make the insult land. Maria felt heat rise inside her chest immediately, but she remained composed. Years of navigating uncomfortable spaces taught her how to survive moments like this without losing dignity. She smiled politely. "Thank you," she replied calmly. "And you've adjusted very well to hiding insults inside compliments." Silence. A man near the far end of the table coughed, trying not to laugh. Another investor looked down immediately. The woman's smile tightened. Maria reached slowly for her wine glass while maintaining calm eye contact. Beside her, William shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Maria felt it, that nervous energy again, that familiar panic William experienced whenever wealthy people became uncomfortable around her. And suddenly she already knew what was coming, before he even opened his mouth. William laughed lightly, too quickly, too carefully. "Oh, trust me," he joked, raising his glass slightly. "Maria still has that South LA fire in her. We're polishing it out slowly." The table exploded with relieved laughter. Maria froze, not because the joke itself was devastating, because her husband had chosen the room over her again. That hurt differently. A politician beside William laughed loudly. "Well," the man joked, "that fire is probably why you married her." More laughter followed. William smiled, and for one critical moment, Maria waited for him to correct it, to protect her, to stop performing. Instead, the attention intoxicated him, the approval, the acceptance. the comfort of wealthy people laughing with him instead of judging him. Then William leaned back casually in his chair and delivered the sentence that destroyed everything. Love can make a man ignore compatibility. Silence. Complete silence. Even the jazz music suddenly felt far away. Maria stared at him. William smiled faintly at first, still trapped inside performance mode. Then he finally saw her face, and his expression changed instantly. Too late. Maria felt something collapse inside her quietly. Not loudly, not dramatically, just permanently. Because there are moments in relationships when somebody accidentally reveals the truth, hiding underneath years of compromise. And in that moment, Maria realized something painful. William loved her emotionally, but he valued elite acceptance more than protecting her publicly. That truth changed everything. Nobody at the table moved. Nobody knew what to say. Maria slowly placed her napkin beside her untouched plate. The tiny sound echoed loudly in the silence. William sat forward immediately. "Maria!" She never answered. She simply looked at him, long enough for shame to finally reach him completely, long enough for him to understand he had crossed a line apologies could not easily repair. Maria stood carefully, gracefully, no scene, no yelling, no tears. And somehow that dignity made everybody at the table even more uncomfortable, because her silence exposed the ugliness of the moment more than anger would have. One investor's wife looked genuinely embarrassed now. Another man suddenly became deeply interested in his wine glass. William stood halfway from his chair. "Baby, wait." Maria walked away, quiet heels against marble floors, past political donors, past billionaires, past the same wealthy crowd William spent years trying to impress. The front doors opened. Cold rain air rushed inside briefly. Then she disappeared into the night. The massive doors closed behind her softly. Inside the mansion, nobody spoke for several seconds. William remained standing beside his chair, staring toward the entrance. Panic slowly replaced alcohol inside his system. One developer finally cleared his throat awkwardly. "She'll calm down." William barely heard him, because deep down he understood something nobody else at that table did. Maria was not dramatic. Maria did not leave emotionally, unless something inside her had already broken completely. William grabbed his phone immediately and walked quickly toward the entrance, ignoring the eyes following him now. Outside, rain covered the long driveway in silver reflections from mansion lights. Valets pretended not to watch him. William scanned the street desperately. No Maria. Only wet pavement and taillights, disappearing far below the hills. He called immediately. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Again. Nothing. For the first time all evening, fear fully entered his chest. Not fear of embarrassment, not fear of gossip. Fear of loss, real loss. Meanwhile, inside the Uber moving through rain-covered Los Angeles streets, Maria sat silently beside the window while old soul music played softly through the speaker. The driver glanced toward her carefully through the mirror. "You okay?" Maria nodded once. "Yeah," but her voice cracked slightly anyway. She looked down slowly at the wedding ring resting on her finger. Then memories started crashing painfully through her mind. William dancing terribly at family cookouts. William burning garlic bread because he got distracted kissing her. William holding her face, gently promising, "You will never face this world alone." Maria closed her eyes tightly. Tears finally slipped down her cheeks. Not because strangers mocked her, because William joined them. And somewhere behind her, high in the Hollywood Hills, inside a mansion filled with wealthy people and fake laughter, William still did not fully understand that he had just destroyed the safest place Maria once carried inside her heart. William barely slept the night Maria left the investor dinner. The mansion emptied hours later. Guests eventually returned to their luxury homes carrying gossip disguised as concern. Rain continued falling over Los Angeles, while William sat alone inside his car outside their house, staring at his phone for almost 20 minutes before finally walking inside. He expected anger waiting for him, expected shouting, expected accusations. Part of him even wanted that, because yelling still meant emotional attachment. Silence felt worse. The house was dark, except for the kitchen light Maria forgot to turn off before leaving earlier that evening. William loosened his tie slowly while walking through the quiet home. Maria. Nothing. He checked the bedroom first. Empty. Bathroom. Empty. Closet. Half her clothes still remained. That gave him temporary relief. She had not packed completely. Maybe she just needed space. Maybe tomorrow they would scream at each other, cry, and somehow fix this before the damage became permanent. William pulled out his phone again, called, voicemail, again, voicemail. Then finally a text appeared, not emotional, not angry, just short. I need time. William stared at those 3 words longer than he should have, because somehow they frightened him more than insults would have. Over the next several days he called constantly, morning, afternoon, late at night. Sometimes Maria answered with 1-word responses. Most times she answered nothing at all. No social media posts appeared. No public embarrassment. No emotional revenge. That unsettled William deeply, because he knew Maria well enough to recognize what her silence meant. She was not trying to punish him. She was emotionally pulling away from him. And once Maria emotionally let go of something, she rarely returned to it fully. A week after the dinner, William arrived home carrying takeout from Maria's favorite restaurant, hoping normalcy might soften things. The house greeted him with unbearable quiet. No music playing from the kitchen, no candles burning in the living room, no television running, while Maria folded laundry badly and distracted herself with reality shows she claimed were research on human foolishness. Nothing. William placed the food slowly on the counter, then noticed something missing immediately. Maria's favorite coffee mug, the yellow one with the chipped handle. She refused to throw away. His chest tightened. He walked upstairs quickly, opened the closet again. More empty space now. Several dresses gone, shoes missing, bathroom shelves half cleared. Reality settled heavier inside him. Maria was not cooling off. She was leaving. That night, William poured himself whiskey and sat alone in the living room staring at nothing, while old memories kept attacking him without permission. Maria laughing at him for mispronouncing seasoning brands. Maria dancing through the kitchen barefoot. Maria sleeping against his chest during thunderstorms because she loved rain but hated lightning. Now the same house felt cold enough to echo. William finally texted her again near midnight. Please come home so we can talk. No response. Hours later he sent another. I'm sorry. Still nothing. Days passed. Then weeks. At work, William became distracted during meetings. Small mistakes started appearing. He forgot investor details, missed calls, repeated numbers during presentations. People noticed. One afternoon, after a tense development meeting, another executive pulled William aside privately. You good? William forced a quick nod. Yeah. The man studied him carefully. You sure? You seemed off lately. William adjusted his cufflinks automatically. Just personal stuff. The executive hesitated briefly, then lowered his voice slightly. People heard about the dinner. William felt immediate heat rise inside his chest. Of course they had. Elite social circles survived on quiet humiliation. The executive continued carefully. You know how these crowds talk. William looked away first, because he did know, and for the first time, he imagined Maria hearing whispers about that night spreading privately through the same wealthy world that already made her feel unwelcome. Shame settled deeper inside him. But still, Maria remained silent. No dramatic confrontation ever came. That became torture. One evening, William visited the downtown lounge where he first met Maria, not because he expected her there, because he missed the version of himself who existed there. The bartender recognized him immediately. Haven't seen you in a while. William nodded faintly. Yeah, he sat in the same section where he first watched Maria help the janitor years earlier. The memory hit painfully now. Back then he admired her kindness because it exposed how emotionally cold wealthy spaces could become. Now he had become part of that coldness himself. William laughed bitterly under his breath at the realization. What's funny? The bartender asked. William stared into his drink quietly. Nothing. But internally, guilt was starting to consume him slowly. Not just because he embarrassed Maria, because deep down, he finally understood something worse. The dinner was not one isolated mistake. It was the final result of hundreds of smaller moments Maria had already warned him about. The jokes, the corrections, the social performances, the need to keep wealthy people comfortable. And now the safest relationship in his life was collapsing because he lacked courage at the exact moments it mattered most. 2 months after the dinner, an envelope arrived at the house. William almost ignored it while sorting mail absent-mindedly near the kitchen counter. Then he saw the law office letterhead. His stomach dropped Instantly, he opened it slowly. Divorce papers. No dramatic letter attached. No emotional message. No attempt to guilt him. Just documents. Professional. Organized. Final. William sat down immediately. For several minutes, he simply stared at the pages without moving, and suddenly, anger flared inside him, not at Maria, at himself, because now he realized silence had never meant weakness. Maria was choosing dignity over chaos, and somehow that made losing her feel even worse. William called her immediately. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Finally, he sent a message. "You're really ending this like strangers?" Hours later, Maria responded. "No, William. Strangers usually hurt each other less." That sentence destroyed him more than the divorce papers themselves. Weeks later, William attended another investor gathering alone for the first time since the separation. The room felt different now, not warmer, hollower. Several people approached carefully, asking where Maria was, without directly asking what happened. William gave polished answers. "She's focusing on herself. We're working through some things." But he noticed the looks afterward. Curiosity, speculation, quiet gossip. One investor's wife whispered something behind a champagne glass while glancing toward him briefly. For years, William fought desperately for acceptance inside these circles. Now, suddenly, the same people felt exhausting. Fake laughter irritated him. Polished conversations sounded empty. Even the luxury itself started feeling emotionally lifeless without Maria beside him, making everything human. Late that night, William returned home alone again. The house remained painfully quiet. He walked into the bedroom slowly and stopped near Maria's side of the closet. Mostly empty now. Only a few forgotten hangers remained. William sat on the edge of the bed, staring into darkness, while regret settled fully into his chest for the first time. Not temporary guilt, not embarrassment. Real loss, because Maria had loved him honestly, protected him emotionally, believed in him before success hardened him into somebody weaker than public pressure. And now, she was disappearing from his life without screaming once, which taught William a brutal lesson he was only beginning to understand. Silence becomes terrifying when it comes from someone who finally stops hoping you will change. The first month after leaving William felt less like freedom and more like emotional shock. People romanticized walking away from painful relationships as if strength erased grief immediately. It did not. Maria cried almost every day in the beginning, not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, the kind of crying that arrived while brushing her teeth, while standing in grocery store lines, while hearing certain songs unexpectedly inside pharmacies and coffee shops. She moved into a small apartment near mid-city Los Angeles after the separation. Nothing luxurious. One bedroom, a tiny kitchen, thin walls, street noise at night, but it was hers that mattered. Even so, the emotional adjustment hit harder than Maria expected, because she was not just grieving a marriage. She was grieving the version of William she fell in love with before status changed him. Some mornings, she woke up angry. Other mornings, she missed him so badly it physically hurt. That confused her. How could somebody hurt you deeply and still feel familiar enough to miss? Maria hated herself for struggling with that question. Financially, things became difficult quickly. William never fought the divorce paperwork, never tried controlling her financially. But Maria had still become accustomed to a lifestyle impossible to maintain alone immediately after leaving. She picked up additional consulting work where she could, temporary contracts, community outreach projects, small branding assignments, anything that paid consistently. But the adjustment bruised her pride harder than she admitted publicly. One afternoon, Maria stood inside a grocery store calculating prices carefully in her head before putting items back on shelves. That moment nearly broke her emotionally. Not because she cared about luxury itself, because she remembered a time William insisted she should never stress over basic things again. Now she was rebuilding her life from scratch, while wealthy people who once smiled in her face probably whispered about her failed marriage over expensive dinners. Maria returned home that evening exhausted. The apartment felt unbearably quiet. She dropped grocery bags onto the counter and leaned against the kitchen sink, fighting tears. Then her phone rang. Aunt Denise. Maria answered weakly. "What are you doing?" "Nothing." "You crying?" Maria closed her eyes immediately. "How do you always know?" "Because your voice sounded like unpaid bills and sadness." Maria laughed, despite herself. That tiny laugh mattered. Aunt Denise continued gently. "Baby, Pain got an expiration date. If you stop feeding it every day. Maria wiped beneath her eyes. I thought I was stronger than this. You are strong, Denise replied. Strong people still hurt. That conversation stayed with Maria afterward, because for weeks she had been treating grief like failure instead of healing. Slowly, she started reconnecting with pieces of herself she neglected during the marriage. Sunday dinners returned. Cookouts, community events, long conversations with women who loved her before William ever entered her life. And for the first time in years, Maria spent time around people who did not make her feel like she needed editing first. One Saturday afternoon, Maria attended a neighborhood cultural festival helping organize vendor booths for a small outreach program. Music filled the streets. Kids danced near food trucks. Older women sold handmade jewelry and beauty products beneath colorful tents. Maria moved naturally through the crowd, helping people solve problems, calm tensions, and organize schedules. Near the end of the event, one local business owner stopped her. You know something? Maria looked up. What? You got a gift with people. Maria smiled politely. I just communicate well. No, the woman corrected. You understand people. Big difference. That sentence followed Maria home that night, because deep down, she realized something important. All those years around William's elite business world had taught her things too. She understood wealthy branding language. She understood image, presentation, perception. But unlike most people inside luxury spaces, Maria also understood communities emotionally. She understood trust, authenticity, culture, connection. Most corporations studied demographics, like statistics. Maria understood them like human beings. That realization slowly changed everything. Still, rebuilding confidence took time. One evening, Maria attended a networking mixer for small business consultants downtown. The room reminded her painfully of William's world. Polished conversations, professional smiles, people measuring each other quietly. For a moment, insecurity hit her hard. She almost left. Then she caught her reflection briefly in a mirrored wall nearby, and suddenly she realized something painful. William had not only damaged her trust in him, he had damaged her trust in herself. For years, she slowly learned to question her own voice inside elite spaces, question whether she belonged, question whether she sounded intelligent enough, professional enough, refined enough. Maria straightened her posture slowly. No more. She stayed. And by the end of the night, she had made more meaningful connections than almost anyone in the room. Not because she performed sophistication better, because she listened better. People trusted Maria quickly. That became her advantage everywhere she went. Months passed. Then, nearly a year. Healing remained uneven. Some nights Maria still stared at old pictures too long, still remembered William dancing badly at cookouts, still remembered him holding her gently after difficult days. Love does not disappear immediately, simply because somebody disappoints you. That was the complicated truth nobody discussed honestly enough. But gradually, the sadness stopped controlling every room she entered, and purpose slowly replaced survival. Maria began consulting part-time with developers trying to improve relationships inside historically ignored neighborhoods. Most firms approached multicultural communities terribly. They used scripted campaigns written by people who never actually lived around the audiences they targeted. Everything felt artificial, forced, disconnected. Maria noticed that immediately. During one meeting, a luxury development team presented advertising concepts for a South Los Angeles housing project. Maria looked through the materials quietly before finally asking, did anybody who created this campaign actually grow up in these communities? Silence. One executive adjusted awkwardly in his chair. What exactly do you think is wrong with it? Maria placed the proposal down carefully. It talks to black communities like tourists, observing culture, instead of people respecting it. The room grew quiet. Then another executive leaned forward curiously. Can you explain? And Maria did, clearly, confidently, without shrinking herself. She explained emotional trust, cultural language, community skepticism toward luxury developers, the difference between marketing at people versus understanding them. By the end of the meeting, everybody in the room looked at her differently, not as somebody's former wife, as an expert. That changed her confidence dramatically. Word spread slowly afterward. Maria became known as someone who could bridge worlds authentically. Luxury firms started hiring her quietly for consulting. Developers requested her input before community launches. Brands wanted her perspective on outreach strategies. And the more Maria worked, the more she discovered something surprising. Her pain had sharpened her emotional intelligence instead of destroying it. She could now walk into rooms full of powerful people without emotionally needing acceptance from them. That freedom changed her completely. One afternoon after a successful presentation, Maria sat alone in a cafe reviewing contracts when she noticed something unusual. She was happy, not temporarily distracted, actually peaceful. The realization almost startled her. For so long, survival consumed her emotionally that she forgot healing could feel calm instead of dramatic. Her phone buzzed. A message from William, the first one in weeks. "I heard your consulting work is going well." Maria stared at the screen quietly, then locked the phone without answering. Not from cruelty, from clarity, because she finally understood something painful about herself. For too long, her self-worth depended partly on whether William chose her publicly. Now she was rebuilding an identity untouched by his approval, and that process mattered more than reopening old wounds prematurely. Meanwhile, William continued hearing her name unexpectedly throughout Los Angeles business spaces. At first casually, then more frequently. She's smart. She understands communities. People trust her. Every compliment unsettled him more, not because he doubted Maria's intelligence, because he was beginning to realize the world was finally seeing the same woman he failed to defend properly. One evening, Maria attended another community event, supporting small local businesses. Music played softly while families moved through vendor booths, laughing and talking beneath warm evening lights. Maria walked through the crowd, greeting people naturally, when an older woman selling handmade candles smiled at her warmly. "You carry yourself differently now," the woman observed. Maria paused. "What do you mean?" "Calmer," the woman replied. "Like somebody who finally stopped apologizing for existing." Maria stood there quietly for a second after hearing that, because the woman was right. For years, Maria walked through wealthy spaces trying to prove she deserved respect. Now she was slowly understanding something deeper. Her value never required elite approval in the first place. And somewhere across Los Angeles, William still had no idea the woman he publicly embarrassed was quietly transforming into somebody far stronger than the version he once underestimated emotionally. 2 years after the divorce, Maria no longer looked like a woman recovering from heartbreak. She looked focused, calm, intentional, not because pain disappeared completely, because she stopped building her life around it. Her consulting work expanded gradually at first, then rapidly. One successful community campaign led to another. Developers started recommending her name privately during high-level meetings. Marketing firms requested partnerships. Luxury real estate companies that once ignored multicultural neighborhoods suddenly needed guidance connecting with communities they never truly understood. And Maria understood something they didn't. People could always recognize when they were being marketed to by outsiders pretending to care. That became her advantage. She never approached communities like demographics on presentation slides. She approached them like human beings with memory, culture, pride, and emotional intelligence. One afternoon, Maria sat inside a downtown conference room reviewing proposals with a luxury development team planning mixed-income housing projects across Los Angeles. A young executive clicked through slides confidently. "We're trying to create a stronger emotional connection with urban communities." Maria glanced at the presentation quietly, then looked back at him. "You keep saying urban, like it's a personality trait." The room went silent briefly. The executive blinked awkwardly. Maria continued calmly. "People know when they're being observed instead of respected." Another executive leaned forward immediately. "What would you change?" Maria stood slowly and walked toward the screen. Then, for the next 20 minutes, she completely transformed the room. Not emotionally, professionally. She broke down language choices, visual messaging, community distrust, cultural authenticity, local partnership strategy, everything. And by the end of the presentation, the same executives who initially viewed her as outside support were taking notes like students. That became increasingly common. Maria entered rooms quietly, then left with influence. The transformation happened so naturally, even she barely noticed it at first. Until one evening, she attended a networking gala in downtown Los Angeles and realized something shocking. People were watching for her arrival now. not because of who she married, because of who she became. As Maria stepped through the ballroom entrance, wearing a fitted cream-colored gown, several executives greeted her immediately. "Maria, good to see you. We loved your last campaign. You changed that entire project." Maria smiled politely, while accepting greetings calmly. Years earlier, rooms like this made her feel evaluated. Now she understood power differently. True confidence did not come from social acceptance. It came from no longer emotionally needing it. Across the ballroom, a woman approached Maria excitedly. "I've wanted to meet you for months," she admitted. "Your community integration work is becoming a huge conversation in development circles." Maria thanked her graciously, then listened carefully as the woman explained challenges her company faced connecting with local neighborhoods authentically. Again, Maria noticed something familiar. Most wealthy firms still approached communities through statistics instead of emotional understanding. They knew numbers. Maria understood people. That difference made her valuable. Meanwhile, William's life continued moving externally upward while internally becoming emptier. Professionally, he remained successful. More projects, more money, more recognition. But privately, something inside him remained unsettled constantly, especially whenever Maria's name surfaced unexpectedly, and it kept happening more often. One afternoon during a strategy meeting, another executive mentioned a consulting recommendation casually. "We should probably bring Maria onto this project." William looked up immediately before he could stop himself. The room continued normally around him. "She's incredible with community positioning. People trust her. She can calm neighborhood resistance faster than anybody right now." William remained silent while listening. A strange combination of pride and regret moved through him painfully, because deep down he always knew Maria possessed emotional intelligence most wealthy people lacked. He simply failed to value it correctly when it mattered most. Later that evening, William searched her company online alone inside his office. Professional photos, conference appearances, partnership announcements, articles mentioning her by name. Maria looked confident in every picture, grounded, elegant, strong, not bitter. That part hurt him unexpectedly. Some selfish piece of William once believed Maria would stay emotionally frozen around their pain forever. Instead, she evolved beyond it. And now, the same elite business world he once prioritized over her was finally respecting her independently. William leaned back slowly in his chair, while staring at one interview clip where Maria spoke during a community development panel discussion. "Trust matters more than branding," she explained calmly. "Communities can feel when corporations value profit more than people." The audience applauded. William lowered his eyes briefly afterward, because years ago, Maria tried teaching him that same lesson emotionally inside their marriage. He simply listened too late. Meanwhile, Maria's personal life changed too, not through another relationship, through peace. Her apartment became warmer, more alive. Fresh flowers near windows, music playing while she cooked, laughter returning naturally during phone calls with family. For the first time in years, Maria felt emotionally settled inside herself. One Sunday afternoon after church, she sat outside with Aunt Denise, while children played nearby, and old soul music drifted softly through the neighborhood. Denise studied her quietly. "You smiling different these days." Maria laughed lightly. "What does that even mean?" "It means your spirit finally caught up with your strength." Maria leaned back thoughtfully. "Healing is weird." Denise nodded. "Because people think healing means forgetting pain. Real healing means the pain stops controlling your identity." Maria looked down briefly after hearing that, because she understood it deeply now. For a long time, she viewed herself as the woman William humiliated publicly. Now she saw herself differently. A woman who survived humiliation without losing softness, without losing intelligence, without becoming cruel. That mattered to her. One evening after a successful client presentation, Maria walked alone through downtown Los Angeles, while city lights reflected across glass buildings around her. Her phone buzzed unexpectedly. "William." She stared at the screen for several seconds before answering. "Hello?" William's voice sounded careful. "I hope I'm not bothering you." "You're not." A pause followed. Then William spoke quietly. "I heard your presentation today went really well." Maria continued walking slowly. "It did. I'm proud of you." The sentence landed strangely between them. Years ago, Those words would have meant everything to her. Now they simply felt distant, still kind, still sincere, but distant. "Thank you," she replied softly. Another silence followed, not hostile, just unfamiliar. Finally, William spoke again. "You seem happy." Maria looked out across the city's skyline. "I'm peaceful." William closed his eyes briefly on the other end of the call after hearing that, because somehow peace sounded even further away from him than happiness. Before ending the conversation, William hesitated, then finally asked the question, sitting heavily inside him for years now. "Do you ever miss us?" Maria stopped walking. For a moment, she considered giving him an easy answer. Instead, she chose honesty. "I miss who we were before you started needing other people's approval more than our marriage." William said nothing, because there was nothing to defend anymore. After the call ended, Maria continued walking calmly through the city while warm wind moved softly through downtown streets, and somewhere miles away inside a luxury office overlooking Los Angeles, William sat alone, finally realizing something devastating. The woman he once reduced socially to impress wealthy people had quietly become one of the most respected voices in the very world that once made her feel small, and he still had absolutely no idea. That fate was slowly positioning Maria to become the single person capable of deciding whether his biggest project survived or collapsed completely. 3 years after the divorce, William stood inside one of the largest redevelopment meetings of his career, trying to hide how exhausted he felt. The project had already consumed nearly 18 months of negotiations, investor pressure, political coordination, and public resistance. If approved, the redevelopment would completely transform a large section of South Los Angeles into a mixed-use luxury district filled with upscale housing, retail space, and commercial investments. If rejected, Williams' company could lose hundreds of millions, and lately approval no longer seemed guaranteed. Community resistance kept growing. Local organizations accused developers of disguising displacement as progress. Public hearings became hostile. Residents distrusted corporate promises. Investors were getting nervous, which meant William was under pressure from every direction simultaneously. That morning, he stood near the front of a massive conference room inside Los Angeles City Hall reviewing presentation notes, while executives whispered anxiously nearby. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked downtown traffic below. Politicians moved through the room, carefully greeting investors. Media teams prepared cameras. Urban planners reviewed documents. Everything felt tense. William adjusted his tie while staring down at the proposal folder in his hands. Sleep had become difficult lately. Not because of the project alone. Maria still lived quietly, inside certain corners of his mind, no matter how much time passed. Sometimes through memories, sometimes through regret, sometimes through random moments that attacked him unexpectedly. A song inside a grocery store, a woman laughing loudly at a restaurant, the smell of garlic bread burning slightly and increasingly through business conversations. Her name carried weight now, real weight. William heard it constantly in development circles. She understands communities better than anybody. She can save projects. She knows how to build trust. The first few times he heard those comments, pride mixed painfully with guilt. Now the feeling had evolved into something heavier. Respect, not because Maria became successful, because she became successful without bitterness consuming her. That mattered more to him than she realized. An executive approached William quietly. "The consulting representatives are almost here." William nodded distractedly. "Good. You think this approval goes through today?" William looked toward the presentation screens ahead. "If community support locks in, yes. And if it doesn't?" William said nothing, because everybody already knew the answer. Failure. Public failure. The room slowly filled further as officials and investors took their seats. William moved toward the front presentation area, trying to focus on business instead of the pressure tightening inside his chest. Then one politician leaned toward another nearby and quietly asked, "Did they confirm who's representing the community integration side?" Another man nodded. "Yes." "Good. If she supports this publicly, the entire conversation changes." William barely paid attention until the man added, "She's become incredibly influential." William looked up slightly. Something about the phrasing caught his attention. But before he could ask further questions, movement near the entrance shifted the room's energy completely. The doors opened, and Maria walked in. Everything inside William stopped. Not dramatically, not loudly, just completely. Maria entered the conference room wearing a cream-colored tailored suit with gold earrings and calm confidence that immediately altered the atmosphere around her. No hesitation, no nervousness, no effort to prove she belonged there. People greeted her instantly. Politicians stood to shake her hand. Executives smiled warmly. Several community leaders approached her naturally. The respect surrounding her felt effortless, earned. William stared at her silently while disbelief moved through him in waves. Maria looked different, not physically alone, emotionally, grounded, centered, like somebody who no longer questioned whether she deserved space inside powerful rooms. And suddenly, William remembered something painful. Years ago, she walked into wealthy spaces trying to survive judgment. Now those same worlds adjusted themselves around her presence naturally. One executive beside William leaned over quietly. She's the reason half these communities even agreed to continue negotiations. William slowly turned. What? The man looked confused. You didn't know? William's chest tightened immediately. Know what? Before he could ask further questions, Maria glanced toward the front of the room while greeting another official. Then her eyes found William. For one brief second, the noise around the conference room disappeared completely for him. Maria held his gaze calmly. No anger, no bitterness, no emotional collapse. That somehow affected William more than hatred would have, because now he understood something devastating immediately. She had truly continued living without him emotionally. Maria gave a polite nod, professional, controlled, then returned to her conversation. William stood frozen for several seconds afterward, while confusion and shock collided inside him violently. The same woman he publicly humiliated years earlier now walked through elite business circles with authority powerful enough to influence the biggest project of his career. And nobody in the room treated her like somebody's ex-wife. They treated her like one of the most important voices there. The meeting began. Minutes later, William forced himself into presentation mode while city officials reviewed redevelopment projections across large digital screens, economic forecasts, housing strategies, commercial partnerships, public investment plans. Normally, William dominated rooms like this confidently. Today, his focus kept slipping toward Maria, sitting halfway across the conference table, calmly reviewing documents while executives listened carefully every time she spoke. One community representative raised concerns about local displacement. Before William could respond, Maria spoke first. If this project moves forward without genuine protections for long-term residents, community trust collapses immediately. The room listened closely. Maria continued professionally. People are not resisting development itself. They're resisting being erased financially from neighborhoods their families helped build. William watched her carefully while she spoke. The confidence, the clarity, the emotional intelligence, everything he once admired about Maria now carried influence, capable of affecting billion-dollar decisions. Another executive asked, "What would make residents support the project?" Maria answered without hesitation, "Respect first, then transparency." The room grew thoughtful. William remained quiet, because deep down, those words no longer sounded like business advice. Alone, they sounded personal too. Hours later, the meeting paused temporarily for lunch, while conversations scattered across smaller groups throughout the conference hall. William stood near the coffee station, trying unsuccessfully to steady himself emotionally. Then he heard Maria's voice behind him. "You still drink coffee, like it personally offended you." William turned immediately. Maria stood there holding a folder beneath one arm, looking calm enough to destroy him emotionally without raising her voice. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then William laughed softly, despite himself. "You remembered that?" Maria raised one eyebrow lightly. "You used to put enough sugar in coffee to qualify as dessert." The old humor between them flickered unexpectedly for the first time in years. Brief, soft, dangerous, because familiarity returned too naturally. William looked at her carefully. "You look." He stopped himself. Maria waited calmly. William exhaled quietly. "You look good." Maria smiled faintly. "So do you." But there was distance inside her tone now, not coldness, boundaries. That difference hit William immediately. For years he imagined what seeing Maria again might feel like: anger, bitterness, awkwardness. He never expected this calm professionalism, and somehow that made the loss feel even heavier, because the woman standing in front of him no longer needed his validation emotionally. Meanwhile, across the conference hall, Investors and officials continued greeting Maria respectfully while discussing redevelopment strategy. William watched it happen in stunned silence. Then one realization settled fully into his chest. Without Maria's support, his company's entire future on this project could collapse completely, and for the first time since the divorce, William truly understood the full weight of what he lost. After the redevelopment meeting, William told himself he would keep things professional with Maria. That lasted less than a week, because the project forced them into constant contact. Strategy sessions, community planning meetings, private consultations, public hearings. Every major decision now moved through conversations involving Maria in some capacity, and every interaction unsettled William more than the last. Not because Maria acted cruelly, because she didn't. She treated him with calm professionalism. No bitterness, no passive aggression, no emotional revenge. That kindness exposed his guilt far more painfully than anger ever could. 3 days after the City Hall meeting, William arrived early for a private strategy session inside a downtown office building, overlooking Los Angeles traffic below. Large proposal boards covered the walls. Community demographic reports sat spread across the conference table. William loosened his tie slightly while reviewing notes, trying unsuccessfully to focus. Then the conference room door opened. Maria walked in carrying a tablet and several folders. She wore a dark blazer with her hair pulled back neatly, moving with the same grounded confidence that had stunned him days earlier. William stood automatically. Maria noticed immediately. A faint smile touched her lips. You still stand up when nervous. William blinked once. What? You used to do that before difficult investor calls. A surprised laugh escaped him softly. You remember everything. Maria placed her folders onto the table calmly. No, she replied gently. Just important things. That sentence lingered between them awkwardly. William looked away first, because part of him still wasn't emotionally prepared for how familiar she felt after all these years. The meeting began professionally enough. Project zoning, local partnerships, community trust concerns. Maria spoke with calm authority, while explaining why several neighborhood leaders still distrusted parts of the redevelopment proposal. You're approaching this like a transaction, she explained. People need to feel included before they feel convinced. William leaned back thoughtfully. So how do we fix it? Maria glanced toward him briefly. You stop talking at communities and start listening to them. Again, the business advice felt painfully personal too. William noticed that repeatedly now. Everything Maria taught corporations about trust reflected lessons he once ignored emotionally inside their marriage. One executive interrupted cautiously. Maria, realistically, how much support do we actually need? She answered immediately. Enough that residents don't feel erased from their own neighborhoods. The room fell quiet. William watched her carefully again. Years ago, wealthy people underestimated Maria constantly. Now executives listened when she spoke the same way investors once listened to him. Not because she demanded authority loudly, because her confidence no longer depended on approval. That difference fascinated him. After the meeting ended, people slowly filtered out of the conference room, until only William and Maria remained reviewing final documents. For a moment, silence settled comfortably between them. Not romantic, familiar. Maria signed several pages, while William pretended to organize papers he had already organized twice. Finally, Maria looked up. You keep staring at me like you're solving a math problem. William laughed quietly. I'm trying to figure out when you became scarier than half the developers in this city. Maria smirked faintly. I learned from experience. That answer carried enough truth to make William lower his eyes briefly. Maria noticed immediately. The atmosphere shifted slightly, softer now, more personal. William cleared his throat carefully. You've built something incredible. Maria studied him quietly before answering. Thank you. I mean that. I know. The simplicity of her response affected him unexpectedly. Years ago, conversations between them became filled with defensiveness and emotional exhaustion. Now, every word felt slower, more honest, less crowded by ego. William leaned against the conference table. You really changed this entire field. Maria shrugged lightly. No. I just noticed wealthy companies kept misunderstanding communities they wanted profit from. William smiled faintly. You always noticed things other people ignored. Maria looked down at her papers, briefly. That used to be one of your favorite things about me. The sentence landed softly, but heavily. William exhaled slowly. It still is. Silence returned again. Different. This time, dangerous. Because underneath business conversations, the emotional history between them still breathed quietly. Weeks passed. The redevelopment project intensified. So did William and Maria's interactions. Sometimes meetings stretched late into evenings while executives left exhausted around them. And gradually, pieces of their old rhythm started resurfacing naturally. One night after a tense planning session, Maria stood near a food table opening takeout containers, while William reviewed budget notes nearby. Maria glanced toward him. "You still skip meals when stressed?" William didn't look up. "I ate earlier." Maria stared at him flatly. "That means no." William smiled despite himself. "You used to bully me into eating. You used to survive entirely on caffeine and ego." William laughed unexpectedly. God, he missed laughing with her. Not polished social laughter. Real laughter. The kind that relaxed his chest instead of tightening it. Maria handed him food anyway. William accepted it quietly. Then, after several bites, he looked toward her carefully. "You still order enough hot sauce to damage internal organs." Maria pointed a fork toward him immediately. "And you still eat food like seasoning personally offended your family." For a brief moment, the years between them disappeared completely. Then reality returned just as quickly. Both of them felt it. The silence afterward carried memory inside it. Maria focused back on paperwork first. William watched her quietly. "You know what's weird?" he admitted softly. "What?" "You still feel like home to me." Maria stopped moving for half a second, then continued reading again calmly. "That's dangerous territory, William. I know." But he also knew it was true, because no relationship after Maria ever felt emotionally real enough. William tried dating briefly after the divorce. Nothing lasted. Not because Maria ruined him emotionally, because she reset his understanding of connection permanently. Most people around him still performed constantly. Maria never did. That difference haunted him. Another evening after a public planning event, Maria and William walked together through downtown streets toward the parking structure, while cool wind moved between tall buildings around them. The city glowed softly beneath evening traffic. Maria wrapped her coat tighter. "You remember when you tried cooking for me the first time?" William groaned immediately. "I almost burned your apartment down." "You absolutely burned my pan. You told me olive oil wasn't supposed to smoke like that." Maria burst into laughter. Real laughter. Warm. Uncontrolled. William stared at her for a second, too long afterward, because hearing her laugh again physically hurt and healed him at the same time. Maria noticed him staring. "What?" William shook his head slowly. "I forgot how much I missed that sound." The atmosphere shifted again, more vulnerable now. Maria looked ahead quietly while they continued walking. Finally, she spoke softly. "You hurt me deeper than anybody ever has." William closed his eyes briefly. "I know." "No," Maria replied calmly. "I don't think you fully do." William stopped walking. Maria turned toward him slowly beneath the downtown lights. For the first time since reconnecting, the emotional walls between them opened fully. William's voice lowered carefully. "Then help me understand." Maria studied him for several seconds before answering. "You made me feel like loving me publicly came with embarrassment." William's chest tightened immediately. "I never meant—" "I know," Maria interrupted softly. "That's what made it worse." William looked down. Maria continued carefully. "You weren't cruel in private. You were loving in private." She paused briefly. "But every time wealthy people got uncomfortable around me, you changed." William swallowed hard. "I was trying to survive those rooms." Maria nodded slowly. "I know." Then came the sentence that finally stripped every remaining defense from him completely. "No, William. You loved being accepted more." Silence. Traffic moved faintly nearby, while the weight of her words settled deeply into him. Because she was right. Not entirely about love itself. William truly loved Maria, but he also loved the comfort of elite acceptance. And when forced emotionally between protecting his wife publicly or protecting his social standing, he failed repeatedly. William rubbed his jaw slowly. "I hate that you're right." Maria's expression softened slightly. "I know you do." He looked at her carefully. "You think I'm a bad person?" Maria answered honestly. "No." That surprised him. "You don't?" "No," she replied quietly. "I think you were weak. There's a difference." That truth hit harder than anger would have, because weakness sounded fixable, which meant William had to fully confront what he became, instead of dismissing himself as misunderstood. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Maria looked toward the parking structure entrance nearby. "We should go." William nodded slowly. But before she walked away, he spoke again. "Maria." She turned slightly. "I really did love you." Maria held his gaze calmly. "I know." A pause followed. "That's why it hurt so much." Then she walked toward her car, leaving William standing alone beneath downtown city lights, finally realizing something devastating. Maria no longer needed revenge to win. Her healing already exposed everything he failed to protect emotionally when he still had the chance. Rain covered Los Angeles again the night everything finally caught up to William emotionally. Not dramatic rain, steady rain. The kind that made city lights blur across glass windows and slowed traffic into glowing lines beneath downtown buildings. William stood inside his office, staring out over the city long after most employees had gone home. The redevelopment project was finally moving toward approval. Community resistance had eased significantly over the past few months. Investors regained confidence. Political pressure settled, and almost everyone involved privately acknowledged the same truth. Maria changed everything. Without her influence, the project would have collapsed publicly months ago. William understood that better than anyone, which made the guilt heavier every day. Because the same woman he once failed to defend publicly was now protecting the biggest opportunity of his career professionally, and she had never once used his past against him. Not once. That haunted him. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. William turned. Maria stood near the office entrance, holding several revised proposal documents beneath one arm. "You're still here?" William glanced toward the clock. Almost 10:30. Apparently, Maria stepped inside, while rain tapped softly against the massive windows surrounding the office. "You missed corrections in the community agreement section," she explained, while walking toward his desk. "I figured you'd want these before tomorrow morning." William accepted the folders slowly. "Thanks." Maria nodded once. "You looked distracted during the last meeting." William laughed quietly under his breath. "That obvious? To me?" "Yes." She moved toward the coffee station nearby, casually. "You still making coffee strong enough to remove paint?" William smiled faintly. Some habits survive emotional destruction. Maria looked back at him over her shoulder. That almost sounded self-aware. William laughed softly, for real this time. God, he missed this. Not flirting, not romance. Just existing beside somebody who understood him without exhausting performance attached to it. Maria prepared coffee, while the office settled into comfortable silence around them. For several minutes neither spoke. Then William finally asked quietly, "Do you ever get tired?" Maria glanced toward him. "Of what?" "Being composed. All the time." That question lingered heavily between them. Maria stirred her coffee slowly before answering. "I wasn't always composed." William lowered his eyes briefly. "I know." Maria leaned lightly against the counter afterward. "For a long time after the divorce, I was angry constantly." William looked surprised. "You never showed it." "That doesn't mean it wasn't there." Rain continued sliding down the windows, while distant thunder rolled faintly across the city. William studied her carefully. "What changed?" Maria smiled faintly. "I got tired of centering my healing around your mistakes." That answer settled deeply into him, because it perfectly explained the woman standing in front of him now. Maria no longer carried pain like identity. She carried wisdom from surviving it. William rubbed his hands together slowly before speaking again. "I need to tell you something honestly." Maria watched him quietly. William exhaled heavily. "There were moments after the divorce where I almost blamed you." Maria raised one eyebrow slightly. "For leaving?" "No," William admitted softly. "For making me confront myself." Maria remained silent, so William continued. "It was easier at first to think you were too sensitive." He looked away briefly. "Then eventually, I realized every warning you gave me was right." The honesty in his voice surprised even him, because for years William avoided fully examining himself emotionally. Work distracted him. Success distracted him. Status distracted him. But Maria's return destroyed every defense he built around his guilt. Now he had to face the truth directly. Maria walked closer slowly and placed her coffee onto the desk beside his. You know what the hardest part was for me. William looked up immediately. What? Maria folded her arms lightly. Watching you become somebody different, depending on who was in the room. William swallowed hard. I hated those rooms, but you still needed them. The accuracy of that sentence hit painfully. William sat down slowly in the chair behind his desk, while rain softened outside. Then finally, for the first time in years, he admitted something out loud he barely admitted to himself internally. I think I spent most of my life terrified of disappointing people with power. Maria's expression shifted slightly after hearing that. Not pity, understanding. William continued quietly. My parents cared about appearances more than emotions. Every relationship around me felt conditional. He laughed bitterly. Success became survival in my head. Maria listened carefully without interrupting. William rubbed one hand across his face tiredly. So when wealthy people judged us, he paused briefly. Part of me panicked every time. Maria nodded once. I know. William looked genuinely confused. You knew? Yes. That answer surprised him deeply. Maria continued calmly. You think I didn't notice how anxious you became around those people? She shook her head softly. I always knew you were scared. William stared at her. Then why did it still hurt you so much? Maria's eyes softened sadly. Because I needed you to choose me anyway. Silence filled the office. Heavy, honest. And suddenly William felt the full emotional weight of every moment he failed her publicly. Not abstractly. Specifically, every joke, every correction, every silence. Every moment he prioritized social comfort over emotional loyalty. William leaned forward slowly, elbows resting against his knees. I became somebody I would have hated when we first met. Maria looked at him carefully. Yes, she answered honestly. No softness, no protection from the truth, but no cruelty either. And somehow that mercy almost broke him more completely. William laughed quietly under his breath while shaking his head. You know what's crazy? Maria waited. The version of me you fell in love with would have defended you instantly at that dinner. Maria lowered her eyes briefly. Yes. William's throat tightened suddenly, because now he understood the tragedy clearly. Maria did not lose feelings randomly. Trust eroded slowly while he convinced himself the compromises were harmless. And by the time he recognized the emotional damage fully, the safest relationship in his life was already collapsing. Rain intensified outside briefly. Maria moved toward the windows overlooking downtown Los Angeles, while William watched her silently. Finally, he stood and walked closer too. City lights reflected softly across the glass around them. For several moments, they simply stood beside each other listening to rain. Then William spoke quietly. I never stopped loving you. Maria closed her eyes briefly after hearing it. Not because she doubted him, because part of her still wished love alone had been enough back then. But it wasn't. Love without courage leaves scars too. Maria looked out across the city before answering softly. I know. William turned toward her slowly. That's it? Maria finally looked at him. What do you want me to say? He opened his mouth, then stopped, because honestly, he didn't know. Forgiveness? Another chance? Relief? Maybe all three. Maria studied him gently. You spent years trying to become accepted by people who would never love you the way I did. William looked away immediately. That sentence pierced something deep inside him because it was completely true. Investors respected him conditionally. Executives valued him professionally. Elite society accepted him socially when useful. But Maria loved him personally, fully, and he sacrificed emotional safety for people who viewed loyalty like networking currency. William laughed bitterly at himself quietly. I was stupid. No, Maria corrected calmly. You were insecure. Again, she refused to reduce him into something simple. That emotional maturity humbled him deeply. William stared out across the rain-covered city afterward, while regret settled fully into his chest without resistance now. Not temporary shame. Not image management guilt. Real accountability. And standing beside Maria that night, William finally understood something devastating with complete clarity. The greatest loss of his life had never been the divorce itself. It was becoming the type of man capable of humiliating the one person who genuinely loved him before success convinced him approval mattered more than protection. The redevelopment project finally received preliminary approval 6 weeks later. For the first time in nearly 2 years, William walked into work without pressure crushing his chest immediately. Investors celebrated. Executives congratulated each other. Political allies praised the project publicly as a model for responsible urban partnership. And privately, nearly everyone credited the same person for stabilizing community trust, Maria. William watched her receive that respect repeatedly now. At meetings, public hearings, private dinners, people listened when she spoke, not because she demanded authority loudly, because she earned it quietly. And every time William saw that respect, pride mixed painfully with regret inside him. Because years ago, Maria needed protection in rooms like these. Instead, he prioritized acceptance. Now the same elite world that once underestimated her depended on her influence professionally. The irony never stopped haunting him. One Thursday evening, William remained late at the office, reviewing final legal documents tied to the redevelopment project. Rain threatened outside again, turning downtown Los Angeles gray beneath heavy clouds. Most employees had already gone home. The building felt unusually quiet. William loosened his tie while flipping through compliance paperwork absent-mindedly. Then he noticed something strange, buried inside one of the older legal review folders. A familiar case number. His eyes narrowed slightly. The document referenced an internal investigation from years earlier, involving questionable acquisition negotiations tied to one of his company's earliest development expansions. William sat upright immediately. He remembered the investigation vaguely. A small ethics inquiry. Nothing public ever came from it. Executives assured him it had been handled internally before reaching media attention. At the time, William was still climbing professionally. One public scandal could have destroyed everything. He opened the attached review notes carefully. Then his heartbeat slowed. Maria's name appeared repeatedly inside the file. William frowned deeply. Why was Maria connected to this? He continued reading. The further he went, the heavier his chest became. Several years earlier, shortly before their marriage began collapsing emotionally, Maria had privately discovered community complaints connected to the company's acquisition practices during a volunteer outreach project. Residents accused developers of manipulating relocation agreements unfairly. Nothing criminal enough for public scandal yet, but damaging enough to trigger investigations. If exposed aggressively, Maria had access to conversations and supporting documentation through local contacts. William stared at the pages silently, then found the final note. Concerns resolved following confidential mediation, facilitated through community consultant. Maria. William leaned back slowly in his chair. Confusion turned into disbelief. She protected the company? More than that. She protected him. Another attached email confirmed it clearly. Maria intentionally prevented several local organizers from escalating allegations publicly after privately negotiating corrections and resident compensation adjustments behind the scenes. She could have exposed everything. Instead, she handled it quietly before investigations grew large enough to damage William professionally. William's stomach tightened painfully, because this happened during the period when their marriage was already deteriorating, meaning even while he slowly failed her emotionally, Maria was still protecting his future privately. A sharp knock interrupted his thoughts. William looked up quickly. Maria stood near the partially open office door holding her coat. "I saw your light on," she explained. "Thought maybe you forgot to leave again." William stared at her differently now, almost like he was seeing hidden years inside her he never fully understood before. Maria noticed immediately. What? William slowly lifted the investigation folder. Silence entered the room instantly. Maria's expression changed slightly. Not panic, recognition. William stood carefully. "You knew about this?" Maria closed the office door quietly behind her. "Yes." William looked stunned. "You protected me." Maria walked closer slowly. "I protected residents first, but you could have destroyed my career." Maria folded her arms lightly. "That wasn't my goal." William stared at her in disbelief. "This happened while our marriage was falling apart." Maria nodded once. "Yes." "Why would you still help me?" Maria looked at him quietly for several seconds before answering. "Because despite everything," she paused briefly, "I still loved you back then." The honesty in her voice shattered something inside him completely. William lowered himself slowly back into the chair behind his desk, while trying to process the weight of what he had just learned. Years ago, he publicly humiliated the same woman who privately protected his future without ever demanding recognition for it. Meanwhile, he spent those same years assuming Maria simply walked away emotionally. God, he never fully understood her at all. William looked down at the folder again. You never told me. There was no reason to. There was every reason to. Maria shook her head softly. No, I didn't help because I wanted leverage later. That sentence humbled him deeply, because William suddenly realized something brutal about himself. If their positions had been reversed back then, he wasn't entirely sure he would have shown the same level of grace emotionally. Maria moved toward the windows overlooking downtown while rain finally began falling lightly outside. William watched her carefully. You protected me while I was embarrassing you publicly. Maria remained quiet for a moment, then answered honestly, You weren't cruel all the time. William, she looked down briefly. That's what made leaving hard. William's throat tightened painfully because she was right. Their marriage didn't collapse from lack of love. It collapsed because love without loyalty eventually becomes emotionally unsafe. William stood and walked toward her slowly. You should hate me. Maria gave a small, sad smile. Hate requires emotional attachment too. That answer hit him harder than anger ever could. Rain slid softly down the massive office windows while the city blurred beneath dark clouds outside. William looked at her carefully. You know what destroys me the most? Maria stayed silent. I thought I was the one who lost somebody loyal. His voice lowered painfully. But you were loyal to me, even when I stopped deserving it. Maria's eyes softened slightly, not romantically, humanly. William rubbed his jaw slowly, while guilt settled fully into him again with new weight now. Not only had Maria loved him honestly, she protected him during one of the most vulnerable periods of his professional life, while quietly enduring emotional humiliation from the same man she was saving. The depth of that reality nearly broke him. Finally, William asked softly, Why are you telling me this now? Maria looked out across the rain-covered city before answering. I'm not telling you now. She glanced toward the folder. You found it now. Silence followed. Then Maria continued gently. People are complicated, William. Loving somebody doesn't suddenly erase because they disappoint you. She paused briefly, at least not immediately. William lowered his eyes, because once again, Maria managed to explain emotional truth more honestly than anybody else in his life ever had. And standing there beside the woman he once publicly reduced for approval, William finally understood the full cost of humiliating someone who loved him sincerely. He didn't just lose a marriage. He lost the only person who protected him, even when he failed to protect her. The final redevelopment approval, gala, took place inside a luxury hotel ballroom overlooking downtown Los Angeles. Everything about the evening reflected power. Crystal chandelier, city officials, developers, political donors, luxury investors discussing billion-dollar expansion opportunities over champagne and polished smiles. Large digital displays showcased future renderings of the redevelopment district, while waiters moved carefully through crowds carrying trays of expensive wine. For most people in the room, the event represented success. For William, it felt like judgment, because standing inside elite spaces no longer gave him the same satisfaction it once did. Now he saw things differently. The rehearsed conversations, the strategic laughter, the way powerful people measured one another constantly, while pretending every interaction was effortless. Years ago, he believed acceptance inside rooms like this meant accomplishment. Now he understood how emotionally empty approval could become when loyalty was sacrificed to maintain it. William adjusted his cufflinks quietly, while executives greeted him throughout the ballroom. Congratulations. You pulled this project together beautifully. This changes the city. William smiled politely through each interaction, but internally his attention remained fixed on one thing. Maria had not arrived yet, and strangely her absence made the room feel incomplete. One investor approached holding a whiskey glass. You and Maria really turned this thing around. William looked toward him calmly. She turned it around. The investor laughed lightly. Well, either way, you two make a strong team. That sentence stayed with William after the man walked away, because years earlier he publicly reduced Maria to impress rooms exactly like this one. Now, Those same spaces respected her more authentically than they respected most people there. That irony followed him everywhere. An hour into the gala, movement near the ballroom entrance shifted attention subtly across the room. Maria entered quietly, but the room noticed immediately, not because she demanded attention loudly, because presence like hers no longer needed performance. Maria wore a dark emerald gown that moved elegantly against her skin, while soft gold jewelry reflected ballroom light gently around her. Several officials approached her immediately. Developers greeted her warmly. Community leaders smiled genuinely. And William noticed something deeply important. The respect Maria received now felt different from elite politeness. People trusted her. That distinction mattered. William watched her from across the ballroom, while conversations moved naturally around her. Years ago, Maria entered wealthy rooms, carefully preparing herself emotionally for judgment. Tonight, she looked entirely comfortable inside her own skin. That realization made William simultaneously proud and ashamed. Ashamed because part of her strength had been built from surviving him. Eventually, Maria's eyes found his across the ballroom. A brief silence settled emotionally inside him despite the crowded room around them. Then she walked toward him calmly. "You look nervous," she observed softly after reaching him. William gave a faint laugh. "I am." Maria raised one eyebrow slightly. "That's new." "No," William replied honestly. "You just never used to notice." Maria studied him carefully for a second, then smiled faintly. "Fair point." Before either could continue, another executive interrupted enthusiastically. "Maria, incredible work on the South District negotiations." She thanked him politely. The executive turned toward William afterward. "You're lucky she stayed involved after all the resistance this project faced." William looked at Maria quietly. "Yes," he answered carefully. "I know." The executive eventually moved away again. Silence settled briefly between them. Then Maria glanced around the ballroom. "Looks like your world finally got what it wanted." William followed her gaze toward wealthy investors laughing beneath chandeliers nearby. "For the first time in years," he answered honestly. "I don't think this was ever really my world." Maria looked at him thoughtfully after hearing that. But before she could respond, the evening coordinator stepped onto the stage near the front of the ballroom, requesting attention for final recognition speeches. People slowly moved toward their seats. William and Maria sat near the front alongside major project contributors while cameras positioned themselves nearby. One by one, officials gave speeches celebrating the redevelopment project, economic growth, community partnership, urban transformation. Everything sounded polished, predictable, carefully rehearsed. Then the host approached the microphone again. "And finally, we'd like to recognize the individuals whose collaboration made this historic partnership possible." Applause filled the ballroom lightly. William stood automatically, while polite applause spread through the room. Years ago, moments like this energized him emotionally. Tonight, something felt different. The applause sounded hollow compared to the weight sitting inside his chest. The host continued. "And of course, Maria, whose community leadership transformed the direction of this project entirely." This applause lasted longer, warmer, more genuine. Maria stood gracefully beside him, acknowledging the crowd politely. William looked toward her briefly, while the ballroom continued clapping. Then suddenly, something inside him shifted completely. Maybe it was the investigation folder still haunting him emotionally. Maybe it was finally understanding how deeply Maria protected him. Maybe it was exhaustion from years of pretending. Whatever the reason, William no longer wanted applause built on incomplete truth. When the applause faded, the host extended the microphone toward William first. "Would you like to say a few words?" William accepted the microphone slowly. The ballroom quieted immediately. Maria glanced toward him calmly, unaware of what was about to happen. William looked across the crowd. Developers, investors, politicians. The exact kind of elite audience he once valued more than emotional loyalty. And suddenly he realized something devastating. Years ago, he humiliated the best thing in his life, to feel accepted by people whose respect remained conditional anyway. William inhaled slowly, then finally spoke honestly. "Most people in this room think this project succeeded because of strategy, investment, and negotiation. The ballroom listened carefully. William glanced briefly toward Maria before continuing. But the truth is, he paused, this project survived because one person in this room understands human beings better than the rest of us. Maria's expression shifted slightly. Confused now, William continued steadily. Years ago, I made the mistake of believing intelligence only looked polished in certain environments. The ballroom grew quieter. I confused social acceptance with character. His throat tightened slightly, and I publicly failed someone who deserved loyalty from me. Now the room felt completely still. Maria stared at him silently. William forced himself forward anyway, because for the first time in his life, truth mattered more than image. I spent years trying to impress people with power while standing beside someone who already possessed something far more valuable. He looked directly toward Maria now. Integrity. Nobody in the ballroom moved. Even investors who normally checked phones constantly remained completely focused now. William lowered the microphone slightly before continuing softer. Maria didn't just help save this project. He paused briefly. She protected communities this city ignored for years. She protected residents. She protected trust. His voice tightened further. And years ago, she even protected me when I didn't deserve it. A ripple of confusion moved subtly through parts of the room. Maria's eyes widened slightly now. William looked toward the crowd again. There was a time in my life when I cared more about fitting into rooms like this than protecting the person I loved. He shook his head lightly. That failure cost me more than any business loss ever could. Complete silence. No polite laughter. No social performance. Just truth, sitting heavily across the ballroom. William finally turned fully toward Maria. And for the first time since the night of the investor dinner years earlier, he defended her publicly, without hesitation. I embarrassed a woman who never once embarrassed me. His voice lowered carefully. And the worst part is, she carried more grace during my weakest moments than I showed during hers. Maria stared at him, without speaking. Emotion moved visibly through her face now, despite her composure. Not romantic emotion. Recognition, because William was finally doing the one thing she needed years ago. Choosing truth publicly, even when it made powerful people uncomfortable. William looked back toward the audience one final time. So tonight, if this room respects me professionally at all, he glanced toward Maria again. Understand that much of what you respect survived because of her character, not mine. Then he handed the microphone back. The ballroom remained completely silent for several seconds afterward. Heavy silence. Not awkward. Reflective. Several people lowered their eyes quietly. Others looked toward Maria differently now. Not with curiosity, with understanding. Maria remained seated beside William, while emotion settled carefully inside her chest. Because for years she believed William might never fully confront who he became publicly. Tonight, he finally had. Not to manipulate her, not to win her back, because it was true. That difference mattered deeply. Eventually applause started slowly somewhere near the back of the ballroom, then spread gradually throughout the room. Not explosive applause, respectful applause. William sat down quietly afterward beside Maria. Neither spoke immediately. Then finally Maria leaned slightly toward him and whispered softly. That took courage. William looked at her carefully. No, he replied honestly. It took me way too long, and sitting there beneath ballroom lights surrounded by the same elite world he once sacrificed his marriage to impress, William finally experienced something he had chased his entire life, but never truly earned before. Self-respect. The gala ended slowly, not with loud celebration, with reflection. Conversations throughout the ballroom felt softer afterward, as if William's speech forced people to examine things they normally avoided emotionally. Several investors approached Maria privately before leaving. Some thanked her for her work. Others simply shook her hand respectfully. For the first time in years, wealthy people were not observing her like an outsider entering their world. They were acknowledging her as someone who changed it. William noticed every part of that quietly. But something else mattered more now. Maria looked peaceful, not triumphant, not vindictive, peaceful. And somehow, that made everything feel final, in a way he wasn't emotionally prepared for. By the time the ballroom emptied, rain had started falling lightly outside the hotel windows again. Los Angeles glowed beneath wet streets and blurred headlights. William stood near the valet entrance, waiting silently, while guests disappeared into black luxury cars one by one. Maria eventually stepped outside beside him, wrapping her coat gently around herself as cool air moved through the night. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Maria glanced toward him softly. "You surprised me tonight." William gave a tired laugh. "Good surprise or terrifying surprise?" Maria smiled faintly. "Honest surprise." The valet brought her car forward slowly, but neither moved toward it yet. Rain tapped quietly against the hotel awning above them while traffic hummed below downtown streets. William looked toward her carefully. "I should have said those things years ago." "Yes," Maria answered honestly. "No cruelty, no hesitation, just truth." William lowered his eyes briefly. "I kept thinking, if I became successful enough, respected enough," he exhaled slowly, "I'd finally feel secure." Maria watched him quietly. "But the higher I climbed," he admitted, "the more afraid I became of losing acceptance." Maria nodded gently. "I know." William laughed bitterly under his breath. "That's the crazy part. You understood me better than I understood myself." Maria leaned lightly against the railing nearby while rain softened around them. "For a long time, I thought if I loved you enough, eventually you'd stop needing those rooms to validate you." William swallowed hard. "I wanted to, but wanting and choosing aren't always the same thing." That sentence settled heavily between them, because it perfectly described the tragedy of their marriage. William loved Maria deeply, but when moments of pressure arrived, fear consistently outweighed courage, and eventually love became emotionally exhausting instead of safe. A few seconds passed quietly before William spoke again. "Do you ever think about what our life would have looked like if I hadn't ruined it?" Maria looked out toward the city lights. "Sometimes." William waited. Maria smiled sadly. "I think we would have had a loud kitchen." He laughed softly immediately, because he understood exactly what she meant. "Yeah, you would have still overcooked expensive steaks. You act like one mistake should define somebody forever." Maria turned toward him slowly. "You burned steak 6 times, William. That feels exaggerated. It's actually generous." For a brief moment, laughter returned naturally between them again, soft, warm, familiar enough to hurt. William looked at her afterward longer than he should have, because beneath the years, beneath the pain, beneath everything broken between them, the connection still existed. That was the dangerous part. Maria noticed the look in his eyes immediately, and for the first time all night, something emotional flickered visibly across her face too. Not confusion, not weakness, grief, because part of her would probably always love the version of William she met before fear reshaped him emotionally. William stepped slightly closer. "Maria." She already knew what was coming before he finished. "I miss you." The honesty in his voice nearly cracked her composure, because she missed him too. Not the man from the investor dinner, the man from taco trucks, from kitchen dancing, from late-night conversations on Santa Monica beaches. The man who once defended her proudly before insecurity hollowed him out slowly. Maria closed her eyes briefly, then looked at him carefully. "You can't miss me properly now that I'm finally respected." William flinched slightly, because again she reached the deepest truth immediately. "I missed you long before this," he admitted quietly. "I know." "Then why does it feel like you're already gone completely?" Maria stared at him silently for several seconds before answering. "Because the version of me that begged emotionally for protection from you," her voice softened, "she had to die, so I could become who I am now." That sentence nearly broke him, not because it sounded dramatic, because it sounded painfully real. William rubbed one hand across his face slowly. "I hate that I caused that." Maria's expression softened gently. "You didn't create my strength, William." She paused briefly. "But your choices forced me to discover it." Rain drifted sideways briefly beneath the city wind. The valet stood respectfully nearby, pretending not to notice the emotional conversation unfolding beneath the hotel entrance lights. William looked toward Maria carefully. "So what happens now?" There it was, the real question hiding underneath everything between them. Maria inhaled slowly, then answered with the same honesty she had carried throughout every painful chapter of their story. "We keep living." William's chest tightened immediately. Together never came. He noticed. Maria saw the realization settle across his face. And God, part of her hated hurting him, because despite everything, she never stopped understanding him emotionally. But understanding somebody and returning to them were not always the same thing. William spoke quietly. There's still something here between us. Maria smiled sadly. There probably always will be. Hope flickered across his expression briefly. Then Maria continued gently. But love is not always permission to return. Silence. Rain. City lights reflecting across wet pavement. William looked down for several seconds before finally asking the question he feared most. You don't think we could ever try again? Maria's eyes softened deeply now. Not because she was conflicted, because she mourned the answer herself. When I loved you before, she explained carefully, I loved you while slowly disappearing emotionally. William lowered his head immediately. Maria continued softly. I fought so hard to make our marriage survive that I stopped recognizing myself. A pause followed. I can't go back to being that version of me. William's throat tightened painfully. People change. Yes, Maria agreed. And you finally did. She smiled faintly. I'm proud of that. But Maria looked directly into his eyes. But sometimes growth comes after the damage already changed everything. That truth settled fully into him now, not as punishment, as consequence. William loved Maria. Maria loved William once, with her entire heart. But timing mattered, courage mattered, protection mattered. And some wounds permanently altered the shape of love, even after healing arrived. A tear finally slipped down William's face before he could stop it. Maria noticed immediately. Years ago, she would have rushed to comfort him instantly. Now she simply stood beside him quietly, allowing him dignity inside the emotion. William laughed weakly at himself. You know what hurts the most? Maria stayed silent. You still feel like the best thing that ever happened to me. Maria's eyes glistened slightly now, too, because part of her agreed. But she also understood something younger versions of themselves never did. Love alone cannot sustain relationships where emotional safety disappears repeatedly. Maria stepped closer slowly, then gently fixed the collar of William's coat the same way she used to years ago before important events. The small gesture nearly destroyed him emotionally. You're going to be okay, she said softly. William looked at her carefully. You really believe that? Yes. How? Maria smiled through sadness. Because for the first time in your life, you finally know who you became. She paused briefly. And now you also know who you want to be. William closed his eyes briefly after hearing that, because somehow, even at the end, Maria still gave him understanding instead of cruelty. The valet opened her car door quietly nearby. Maria looked toward it briefly. Then, back at William, one final time. I forgive you. The words hit him instantly. Deeply, not dramatically, like warmth reaching somewhere frozen for years. William's voice lowered carefully. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive myself. Maria stepped back slowly. That's your journey now. Another silence passed between them. Not empty this time. Complete. Then Maria gave him one final soft smile filled with history, pain, affection, and acceptance all at once. And William finally understood something devastatingly beautiful. Sometimes people return to your life, not so you can love them again, but so you can finally understand the value of the love you mishandled when you still had it. Maria entered the car slowly. The door closed softly behind her. William stood beneath the rain watching the taillights disappear into downtown Los Angeles traffic, while grief and gratitude settled together inside his chest. Not because he lost her that night. He lost her years earlier. Tonight simply gave him the honesty to finally accept it. And somewhere inside the moving city lights ahead, Maria rested quietly against the car seat, looking out across Los Angeles with calm eyes and a healed heart. Not victorious, not bitter, free, because in the end, the woman he publicly humiliated did become powerful enough to destroy him. But her greatest strength was choosing not to. Final narration. Some people return to your life to love you again. Others return so you finally understand what you lost.